Welcome to the Occult Rejects. We are two former secret society members who were determined to show the public the truth that occultism has been purposely integrated into every aspect of society, from politics to music, Hollywood, and science. This is used to manipulate the public as a whole and to protect the fake elite. The symbols are used all around us to affect world events and public perception, our behavior, and even our future. We will translate the occult so that you have eyes to see. We reject their agenda to give you the tools to save yourself.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Occult Rejects with your hosts Lux
and the MY Patriot.
Today we have a continuation of the first part, some of the stuff that we did not get to, which is really awesome information, talking about Shakespeare, all the occult stuff revolving around Rosicrucianism and the connections with Shakespeare. So we have Marqui on today with us again. He's an awesome researcher, and he's got some really crazy stuff, and we can't wait for you guys to see it because this is absolutely fascinating to me.
Yes, thank you so much for coming on, Marquis. I've been looking forward to this for real.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, no, this is going to be great.
Yeah, and I guess we could just do a quick review, Marqui, just kind of bring people up to speed on what we covered last time.
Yeah, for sure. So basically, we were really focused on the start of the whole thing with the manifesto. So we kind of broke down some of what we saw in the manifesto and some of the people that were involved early in Rosicrucianism and the kind of the plan they had. So we didn't get much past that. We were just kind of getting into the Shakespeare portion of it and kind of showing how Shakespeare is part of that plan, and essentially there is no real individual Shakespeare. It's another thing. So I think where we would start is just kind of from there. Ready to roll?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Strap in.
So we hit a little bit of this shit last time, but we didn't get to see the pictures. So so people can see the pictures and some of what we'll be talking about. One of the kind of things that's worth just remembering is that number 9 being Jesus and the X being Christos for Greek. So, and the reason that becomes, and I could break down why. It's a bit of a long thing. I don't want to spend too much time on that. But if you see these sheets that are up here, if you're watching, I have a lot of explanation of how it all breaks down. Some of these codes and things along those lines. So one of the codes that we saw from the sonnets, and these are all sonnets, and the pages that you see are facsimiles from the first edition. So that's what you kind of need to use if you want to dick around with these codes. And so what these codes are saying is essentially like Jesus needs to validate anything you find within these codes. And for that to happen, it needs to be validated 3 times, like, the Trinity that he is. Mm-hmm. And so every time, like, for instance, what we're looking at here, it's codes saying that De Vere is the writer of the sonnets. And it says this 3 times. And so these pages kind of explain how you find all 3 and why they work and they're legitimate or whatever. And then the other thing that you can do is, so that thing that we're seeing, this poem of sorts, if you put it on a grid of 19 and you fill it out, no spaces or anything like that, there's a whole bunch of other codes that start appearing. And that's kind of what you're looking at here. And it's all about bloodlines. So for me, the sonnets are very much about bloodlines and De Vere's bloodline, because he didn't have a legitimate son, and so it's essentially saying like who his son actually is and that kind of jazz, and also boasting himself as kind of Shakespeare. So if you look to the left, there's a Christogram in the sonnets kind of first page there, and the way that this was found was, if you look, there's yellow triangles. And so you start with the by G, there's a dot there. And if you go to the next, so you can start there as a point. Oh, my bad. getting a little ahead of myself. You start there and you can link it to another point and bring it back to the top. And someone did this, and he was able to make 6 of these 90-degree triangles. And when you do that, you can make a perfect circle. So he made a perfect circle. And then someone else came along and said, like, hey, it looks like I can make a Christogram out of this. And so that's what they did. So you can see this is brings
So
in the
funny how
Jesus.
you mentioned a perfect circle. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, no.
I just recently had, I had someone on covering Tool and just, all the occultism behind that band and in the lyrics. And you mentioned a perfect circle. And I mean, it's the same fucking shit. Goes back to him again.
Mm-hmm.
I think you mentioned them with a map too. Or is it? No, it was Metallica you mentioned. But that we'll see later.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like,
We'll see that.
You remember that? I swear. Yeah, I don't know if it was something that was it something that you'll be showing at
Yes.
all? I swear that thing totally reminds me of the Unforgiven from Metallica when the guy is inside that room just carving out that fucking hole in the wall. There's even a part when they show that I think one of the holes on the side or something is covered up by like a picture of like a clown like stuck on the wall. Like it's just like so fucking like it just made me think of neither that was like jesters or Shrinerish type stuff, and then but it really does look like the same exact image that you're going to show later on. It really makes me think of that video, Unforgiven.
Yeah. Well, so you make this perfect circle, and then you can make this Christogram using the P from Shakespeare at the top there, and then if you go to the X's and you circle the couple of letters that are attached to those points, it makes a message. And the message is, where is it? It's on the paper there. Yeah. Sonnet by G. N. de Vere. And so, again, making that reference that it's by G, which you can represent. I mean, you could say a couple different ways with that. But by G. N. de Vere is what it's saying in the Christogram. And if you go back to that grid by 19, there's a bunch of anagrams in those. All of the different colors are for different anagrams. Okay. And one of them leads you to drawing, and like you need to use like shit like understanding how coats of armor work, the language for coats of armor work for some of this stuff. So it really makes you touch on a lot of different things of that culture of the time.
I think coats of armor are basically talisman, in my opinion.
I would say that would be true for sure, because they're saying quite a lot.
Yes, yeah.
The way you can tell a story with those coats.
Yeah, I think that's a way of even representing like what you're, where you are in occultism or magic, or like kind of like stating like you can be making a statement with those things as well.
Totally, and so that's a world I barely understand. I only touched on it just to verify this shit, but one of the things you'll see in gray, there's kind of like an abbey. It's a mirror version of the picture in the middle. All right, you can see there's the courtyard surrounding. There's one square in the middle that's not grayed out that I haven't highlighted, but anyways, so that's a representation of the abbey. If you take that Christogram and you scale it properly and you put it over the abbey, it marks an X marks the spot. If you go to that spot, there's a Shakespeare statue, but more importantly, it's the people that were buried there, and it's De Vere. And the Shakespeare statue misquotes Shakespeare because they have to fit it with code.
Right.
I saw that. I think I looked that up actually, and I saw that. Yeah, it's not correct.
And it's all over. Any statue, like Westminster Abbey has some stuff. It's always coded, and even if you go to where they say he's buried now, all of those plaques are coded as well. Yeah, we'll see some of that too. So just to kind of show you how that looks, I thought it's pretty neat kind of thing that they were able to do. And so now we'll move into the first folio, which is different. So I would say the sonnets were a fabrication of De Vere. So when people say Shakespeare was made by De Vere, like they're not wrong, because if they did any work with the sonnets, that's what the sonnets say. When you move to the folio, which is something that came out afterwards, came out actually 5 years after De Beers was officially dead, the code's different. It adds Bacon to it, Francis Bacon. And so I would say that that's a different work with different players, but it's De Vere and Bacon for sure, because the codes say that it's them. But I would add things like, at the time, De Vere was the main guy that was sponsoring a lot of artists and playwrights, and even had a home for them. And so he was like known as Apollo. A lot of, if you read books from people of the time, they make references at the beginning of their books to him as Apollo and stuff, and for his help and patronage and stuff like that. So he was a really big deal in that world already. And he had this house, and there are documents showing that some of the artists from this place, because De Vere had some financial problems that we'll see, I think, why he had those problems coming up here. But because he wasn't paying them off like he was supposed to, they started getting pissy, and some had the balls to say something. But they never called him out outright. Again, he was a dangerous dude. These were very dangerous people. They would straight fucking murder people like on the streets and stuff. So like, there's always this air of cautiousness with him. Like all these guys ended up like at some point or another in the Tower of London, jailed in the Tower of London for trying to kill the Queen or some shit, you know, like doing something they shouldn't have been doing. But they always get released. So then when we look at the folio, it does a lot of the same things. It's leading you to, it's saying who wrote it, but it's doing something that's similar, but more in depth, I would say, than the sonnets do. It's a much more in-depth piece of work, and the coding is more in depth as well. And so without getting on all that, because honestly, that's like 10 hours worth of stuff to actually look into, it leads you just like we did with the no worries, bro. It's just like we did with the sonnets. It leads you to places. One of the places, and these are some of the places that it leads you to. So, well, we'll start with. Oh, geez, I should not click on the screen. So the first thing, for one of the main places it leads you to, is Shakespeare's official place of death, or sorry, where he's actually buried. Sorry. And that's where you see dead center. There's a plaque in brick, and it has a code on it. It has a piece of writing, I should say, that is encoded. I mean, there's Y's, there's little T's on top of the Y's. There's all sorts of weird stuff. A big problem with this, and this is, again, it's hard to find the original because you can only... So this is not the original. It's been fucked with. So the code doesn't work on the original anymore. But the person that found it was able to find a picture of the original in a book. And that's what he uses. So then he rewrote it big, brought it there to kind of show how it actually is supposed to look and work. And so doing that led him to this next place, which is this huge kind of palatial estates area. And there's all sorts of things going on in that place. And one of the things is this is the guy that was the first one, I think, to circumnavigate the Earth. This is like their home base area, and they have this right beside. You can see this monument, I guess, with a plaque in it that carved marble, just center there. Can you see my cursor at all when I move it around? No, eh?
No.
Okay. So I'll just be more descriptive. So in the center, just off to the left of that plaque that's on the stone, that's the thing that we're going to be zooming in. So just above it, that's a zoom in portion of that plaque. And you'll notice that their hands are going through the marble. And his thumb is pointing right in between the RC in Arcadia.
Yes.
All right. Yes. So I think that's pointing to Rosicrucianism.
Well, yeah, especially, RC, always in Rosicrucianism, always... It refers to Christian Rosenkreutz, which is who they said was the founder, like we were talking about before.
Right. So I think that's what they're showing, and I think the fact that their hands are going through it is meaningful as well, because of where it leads you to. So just below on that same piece of marble, there's this empty plaque. There's letters on above. There's a D and an M. and there's nothing in between. People have been trying to figure out why it wasn't finished or what it is or whatever the hell, until this guy comes out around and says like, oh, it's gematria, and those letters are numbers. It's day, it's minutes and day or whatever, right? It's an actual location is what it's telling you. And that's where we get to the Northern Cross constellation, or the Swan, which the Northern Cross is found within that Swan constellation. And that's why I put the top right picture. So that is a one of the tarot cards for the Rosicrucian deck.
Oh, wow.
Is this one. And you can do a couple interesting things. So your logo's hiding it, but the top right corner is a swan. Just like there's a dude on the top left, and then there's a line that leads to a star. I don't know who that dude is. He has a snake wrapped around him. It looks like the snake even has a crown. But on the right side, where under your logo, there's a swan and a star above the swan. Which I think is interesting. I probably more interesting for you guys for different reasons. But the thing that it made me think of was this. Like, this constellation is important. And they're marking it on this tarot card.
Is the thing on the left-hand side, is that like an archer in the sky?
I see,
I can't tell.
top left, I see him kind of wrapped around with a snake.
Oh, okay.
And he's looking to the center, like at God's hand that's coming down, essentially.
Okay. All right.
Is what it looks like to me. And the snake looks like it has a crown. So anyways, there's lots going on with this, but I did find that interesting that it's got that swan there beside the star. And I was even looking into something completely different, but it's essentially they found this cave in, I forget the exact location, like past Tibet in the valleys or something like that. Anyways, I butchered that shit, but the cave found the earliest remains of kind of humans. And they were a specific kind of human. And these particular people, they only know this because they found pendants in this place, but they're swan. They would seemingly, the swan was like an important thing for them, a figure that they kind of looked at. But the cool thing about these guys is that they were thousands and thousands of years ahead of their time. Like, they had sewing needles, they had like all sorts of technology that didn't happen for thousands of years. And they're noticing that they were kind of, even through text or like through different things, they see that they were actually the ones that seemed to pass on a lot of technology down into Europe and stuff. And they also noticed that through DNA testing that they were really high in autism, which I thought was interesting. But it's just interesting that swan is prevalent.
Well, I think white birds can say a lot.
It's the color.
For me, when I see that,
it's a big white bird that basically just sits on top of the water. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, for me, when I see that, right, so you have the swan and the star, and that's definitely not by coincidence. I see that being a hidden meaning, right? So if you look at, like, in occultism, Hebrew is a great way that they can hide things in sort of plain sight. Well, if you look at, in Hebrew, what letter is associated with a star? Well, it would be Tzadi, which represents the number 90. And there you have your 9 again, because in gematria you would drop the 0 because it would just be 9. And that letter, Tzadi, it's represented in the tarot card, or in the tarot, as the star. And it's also represented by a fishhook, this letter as well, and is represented by Aquarius, the sign of Aquarius. So there's your water element as well.
Yeah, the water bearer.
Yeah, and that that's like they're encoding so much just with those two symbols, and then you go look at that letter, and that letter in Hebrew has got the letters in Hebrew have whole different personalities that are expressed in that letter, So
fucking cool. So And so this next part, I don't know how meaningful it is. I thought it was interesting because I was surprised to see this building, but the same property where we find this memorial or this I don't know, this plaque or whatever. Like when I look at that tarot card and I look at that building, I feel like I'm looking at something that's very much the same. It's not quite right, but I feel like it's representing the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
No. Yeah. I often wondered if it's just supposed to kind of almost be like a watchtower in a sense, too. No, I don't know.
I don't know. Because the roof has 8 sides on the tarot card, and this is an 8-sided roof. It just doesn't square out, right? So it's a bit off. But then yeah, I just thought it was interesting.
Do you know what number this tarot card is?
I have the deck with me here.
Watch it.
Is that supposed? Which card is that supposed to actually be again? I thought maybe that was their version of the tower card. I have no idea.
I don't know. I got their deck. It's a weird story how I got this deck too. But
it's got to be the star card. It's got to be number 17.
Oh.
At least what if I'm thinking right, it should be.
And then if it's not the star and it is the tower, that would be 16. Then that could still be 17 on a deck that starts with 0.
Yeah.
Which goes with that one, I think. The 17th letter of the Hebrew alphabet as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, dude, they have some. Their cards are chock full of stuff. Okay, here we go. It is K.
What?
Can you guys see that?
It says K.
I'm trying to flash it for you.
Yeah, no, I just can't tell. Let's see. K, that's all it says on there? Damn.
That's bizarre. Huh.
All right.
Well, is there another letter in the upper left-hand corner? I can't tell what that is, unless it's a cup.
It looks like a cup to me.
Right.
Like
so
a chalice.
More of the same thing I was saying before with the Aquarius symbolism.
And what deck is that?
This is the Rosicrucian one. They call it the Rota Mundi.
How do you spell that?
ROTA
Uh-huh.
MUNDI.
Rota Monday, K, tarot card.
Yeah, Rosicrucian Arcanum. And the company. I got this, dude. Because while I was doing the Shakespeare, I'm like, at some point I'm going to need to figure this shit out. And that that deck was like, I had to find it. If I just went in Google into Amazon and wrote it, it wouldn't show up. I found a link to Amazon for it using DuckDuckGo. Or whatever. Yeah, I had to use this other thing, and then it got me to a link on Amazon for it. So I purchased it. It never showed up for it. Like, it was late. So Amazon's like, here, we'll refund you. And like a day later, it shows up. So I got it for free, which I thought was fun. But
that's and again, even it goes back to what I was just saying with the Tazidi letter. Again with the 9. But if you look at that letter, if it talks, because there's different versions of this letter in Hebrew. You can use this letter at the end of a sentence, but when you use this letter at the end of a sentence, it's different. And it says, even when it's describing this letter, when you use it at the end of a sentence, you need to put it upright. And it's called getting off of your knees. It's like the way that they describe it. It's one of the 5th final letters in Hebrew and stuff that you can use at the end of a sentence, but when you stand it up from its position to write it at the end of a sentence, it would be a K. I mean, a very rudimentary, like if you were to take it from Hebrew and then into our simple language, English, and then just put it upright, it's a K. So that's weird to me too.
I feel like Hebrew is one of those that's worth learning. Like,
yeah.
Dude, there's huge amounts of occultism revolve all around Hebrew. Just the language itself, it's nuts.
Well, yeah, and it's quite beautiful, like the way it works and stuff. But yeah, I'm very impressed with it. I had no idea, right? Once you start looking into this, I know.
Yeah.
Well,
it's commendable.
That card that you're showing says it's their tarot looks a little bit different. It's associated with the page. No, my bad. The knight. It's the minor arcana, and it's the oral written applied under wands. Under cups, it means ecclesia spiritualis. Under pentacles, it means luke or bull, and under swords, it means sun and something else I can't read. This deck seems very different, probably, than the other ones, actually.
You said
dude, I want you guys to look at it.
You said it was only in the minor arcana?
Well, yeah, it's saying that this card is, yeah. Huh. But I mean, even looking at their cards, it's totally different than any other card that I've normally seen. It mentions Elvis Levi possibly making the connection to the Road of Monday also.
There's another tarot deck that I got just because I thought it was fascinating, but and because it's supposed to be different, that I think you guys would love to look into. Sorry, quick sidetrack. Then we need to fucking roll. But
sorry,
it's this one, Visconti di Mordorn Tarot. Because as far as I've been able to research, it's the oldest one in the world, and it disappeared for a couple hundred years until a family found it or whatever and decided to give it to the museum of in Italy. And so the museums reproduced them. So I got a copy of it in its original like sizing and everything. But yeah, because it's supposed to have a few extra cards. It's supposed to be different. So I thought you guys would find that interesting. That's like an old one that was made for royal. Yeah,
that's
supposed
crazy.
to be different.
I'll definitely check it out. That's awesome.
Yeah. All right. Fucking let's roll. We got so much to do. Okay, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but I did want to show it. This is that the John Dee symbol that he created for his Enochian magic. And I just wanted to show just how crazy intricate it is in terms of mathematical equations and its relation to understanding our solar system, essentially. Because you could see how it's in line with Da Vinci in the top right corner. And so I think it's also, it illuminated me on what that Da Vinci piece of paper actually is about. But the crazy thing about this is that number 5040, and that all of these rations, like the size of the Earth, the size of the moon, the distances between the Earth and the moon, all of these things are all, you can figure all of these things out by using the number 5040. And
yeah,
so
I've often wondered, believe it, and I don't want to cut you off or go too like far out there with that, but you know, I have come across that before with the 5040, and I've often wondered if that's like something to do with kind of like a balance or something like that, you know, or I mean, like, could that even go back to, it's not 50-50, but 50-40? Could that even refer to like the hermaphrodite symbol on Hode, on the Tree of Life, where it just shows you something to do with, I think, the balance of those two energies is also the key to realizing that is also the key to escaping the matrix. It's showing something like that to an extent, like that, like a ratio of energies.
All right.
And can be reduced to 9 too. Again,
yes. which I believe is what puts us in the matrix.
Did you just do that math like just now?
Well,
in your head,
I just wasn't going to say anything.
I
don't want to interrupt you too long.
Oh no. Dude, it's fucking dope. The John Dee, there's a little quote there in the bottom left if people are interested, but it also shows the triple tau and that fourth tau a little bit more clearly, the upside down one that you can see there. Just so if people are wondering what the hell I'm talking about when I'm saying the four taus, you can kind of, that shows you a little bit more so you can kind of visualize where that fourth one is. So anyways, dope symbol, does a pretty good job. And now we're going to move in. So we're still with the Shakespeare crew. They're involved in a lot of things, including the Virginia Company. Virginia Company is super important to our North American kind of history. And so they won't be named primarily, like if you look them up, you will be able to find. But if you're just looking up Virginia Company, you're not going to notice a lot of the names that we've been talking about, but they are part of it. But these were some of the more forward faces of the company. So Sir Edwin Sidney was one of the founder. He's also a major reason why King Charles I got executed. So up to killing kings and queens fits perfectly with what we saw with the Rosicrucian agenda early on. And he was another guy that kind of outwardly, while the king was still alive, talking shit about the constitutional monarchy and kind of rejected this divine right of kings, which is not a fucking good idea to be doing if you're messing with these guys. But he did this while the dude was alive and after the king gave him his position. And this is something you see often. Like they get these positions, and as soon as they get what they need from the ruling class, they divert. You start seeing their true intentions, what they're about. And you know, like we said in the first episode, De Vere also, his family tried to kill Queen Elizabeth, and he was the ward of Queen Elizabeth, and she even, you know, imprisoned him for a portion of time for knocking up one of her chambermaids or some shit. Sir Thomas was also the governor of West India Company. And they are like the West Indian Company, and what they did to India is fucking out of this world. Like a lot of the wealth of Europe and England came from the West Indian Company. You can see charts where there's this really great Indian professor that charted kind of what happened to India after they showed up and did this. Because India has like an insane amount of resources and wealth, and they extracted it from there. And you can really see how the rise of England comes to be through that West Indian Company. So these guys were involved in all that shit. In 1613, Samuel Argyle sailed up the Pontiac River searching for corn and shit. And this is where he got abducted. And the whole story of Pocahontas comes from. So I thought that was a little fun thing. So this company was a traded company. King James kind of put it together, and the objective was to colonize the eastern coast of the Americas. They had quite a large swath of land. You can see it on the right there. You can see the lines like from the coast. There's a straight line across Virginia, and then it goes up into Canada, and they actually own quite a lot of Canada. The center of Canada as well was part of that piece of chunk of land. And so part of the big problem with them being able to, I skipped something super important. So they're the ones that started Jamestown, the settlement on Jamestown. If you look at a lot of the names on that transcript of people that landed there, that it's a more Masonic kind of Rosicrucian crew. And they were the first people to actually create a true legislature and general assembly in the United States. And so it has a weird relationship where it was independent of the crown in terms of how it governed itself. Like it had autonomy. So, but they were never supposed to do that. Like that was never the intent of the king, was for them to kind of create this type of government. But that's what they were doing. Shit started not going super great because they didn't find gold or silver. So that was a big fucking problem. They put a lot of money in this shit. They're not finding the resources they were hoping for. And this is where I think you see a lot of problems with De Vere and some of these other guys at the end of their life getting in trouble, selling off lands and properties and things like that to fund the Virginia Company because they're not making money. And they have.
You mentioned a date before. What you said, 1615?
1613.
Oh, okay. My bad. I thought you said
1606, 1617, 07. No, I don't know. Why?
No, because I just there was a number that popped into my head that added up to 13. I could be just completely wrong. And I know that supposedly something is associated with them with a Friday the 13th. People say.
Okay.
I might have just heard the wrong number, and I heard 13.
I don't know. I probably said the fucking wrong
No,
name.
no, I heard
There's
the
16, 13. There's a 13 in there, I guess. Okay, yeah. So then what they decide they need to do is like, we need to give people land. And this is where the company promises 50 acres of land for each person that pays his or her own passage or anyone else's passage for that matter into Virginia. So because they don't have money, they have land, they're giving the land away to bring in people to then generate, what they're trying to do and get the colonies going. Jamestown massacre happens. That really fucks shit up for them. That's a pretty famous story in the U.S.'s early development. And so James the King decides to dissolve the company and makes it a royal colony. Right. So and the king found out what they were doing in terms of the way they were running the government there, and he was fucking pissed. It's like, this is bullshit. Like, you're not supposed to be doing this, But again, like, if you go back to the manifestos and you read these books and everything, like, they're always stating that this is what they want to do. Bacon has a book talking about going to the New World and creating a new Atlantis, essentially.
You know what's wild? You're actually telling a story. I'm trying to find out because I can't remember the name. It's a show on Netflix. It's actually telling the same fucking story as you right now.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's it's the one with the my wife will probably remember it. It has to do with this lady who's like, basically she's looked at as a witch because she was a nurse, I think, and she's able to go back in time. And she goes back in time and like she knows like how to like naturally heal people just from like, being a nurse and actually knowing, chemicals and stuff like that. And yeah, I don't know. I can't remember the name of it. My wife somehow she can't remember it either. But there's a part where they start actually bringing up people like involved with wars that were Masonic, and they touch on that very lightly. And then there's at some point where somehow this couple, this lady is with this guy, and basically I think because of her knowing the future, she's trying to like I guess manipulate it now with him to change things that might have went wrong, maybe things that weren't right. And they end up at some point kind of captured and I think let go or whatever. Somehow they end up on the shore of, I'm almost positive, fucking Virginia, when they were somewhere over in Europe. And they're like, oh, fuck. And that's where they ended up in the United States. They landed there.
Interesting. Because there's a nun from Italy. This was before they found out about this was before North America was found out. Anyways, she claimed that she was going to North America and talking to people, and she was claiming that she was getting them ready for when white people show up. When they did show up and they found this tribe, the tribe actually said the same shit. They're like, oh no, we knew you were coming. We spoke with this lady. And I think it's the same area. So yeah, it's an interesting little side story there with her. I forget her name, sorry, but she wrote some books and stuff. It's interesting. She got in a lot of shit too there. But so this leads us to this map here. This is Virginia. This is an early map. I think it's credited to being one of the earliest detailed map of the interior. Usually it's a lot of coastline stuff. This goes into the interior. And I just put a little side. I just put a stamp. This is a Newfoundland stamp, top right of Lord Bacon. This is 1910, right? So even hundreds of years later in Canada, we're still very much aware of his importance to us. And I just thought it was funny because it has a 666 on it. It was just fun. But and then we see that Enochian symbol again, but this just breaks it down in terms of the kind of occulted information that it's portraying in terms of like the planetaries. Like, you guys will probably understand this more. What I thought was interesting is that it does this and it also does the mathematical stuff, like the works of Shakespeare and like a lot of these big works. Like, it's doing multiple things, kind of showing, I think, how smart he is. And then this is one of actually John Dee's books, and I thought it was fun because I don't know, first pop-up book ever. I don't think he gets credit for it.
Really?
I don't know, but they're pop-up books. They're
That's
pretty
cool.
dope. Yeah, he's got tons of these. Yeah, and I mean
That would even make me wonder, like, like how me and Lux sometimes think that maybe the Tree of Life is supposed to be a three-dimensional
right.
thing. Oh, now I got the name of it. Sorry, just to throw it out there real quick. If anybody's seen Outlander, all right, or if you've heard of it,
I think
go
that
and
was
check
popular,
that
wasn't
out.
it?
That shit is occult as fuck. It's showing you. I think it might even be showing you the Mandela effect, how things might get changed because of people being able to fucking go back and change stuff.
Interesting.
And and it's this lady, like I said, she's from World War II, and somehow ends up like between these stones and goes back in time and ends up with this fucking guy back. I forgot what other country.
This does sound familiar now.
Yeah. It's a pretty wild show. It's pretty fucking crazy. But it's very occulted, and they talk about, they do start showing stuff with Masons, and I'm almost positive they end up over in Virginia.
Perfect. And so when I was looking at this map, I know because it's Ben Johnson, and he has a dedication in the first folio that he makes that has some codes in it. I realize it's a Shakespeare work. Francis Bacon says, like, if you want to understand what we're trying to say, you need to look at all the all the Rosicrucian works to get the full picture. So I think this is part of it. I don't know exactly what the coding is saying. I know this guy on the right seems to be wearing a Masonic apron. Like, this is not a thing you wear, and he's holding a pig. De Vere's family line is this pig or hog or whatever. You'll see paintings and stuff with him wearing medallions with the pig. But so I was trying to figure out, I'm like, I'd be fucking cool if for the show I could actually find something on this map or whatever. It's saying something. I think I did. It's very simple what I did. So that's why I think it's not what this map is actually about, but maybe just one of the little things that it's saying. I would imagine there's tons of stuff that it's saying. Like one of the things I thought maybe was, if you follow the waterway that goes inland, there's a really thick portion that kind of goes perpendicular, a big bay. And that's kind of like a base, I think, of like what looks like a triangle. If you follow the other line, it goes up and then comes back down right in the middle of the map. There seems to be this triangle, and then there's an A in the capstone, kind of where it should be for the eye. So I'm like, there might be something in that A, inside the A's or whatever. I couldn't find shit there, but I did notice, like, if you look at the top at the sorry, my mapping information talk is bad, but the horizontal line on the 40. So there's at the top, you can see 39, and then you go to the 40, and the 40 is mirrored. There's a typo there. Huh. So that kind of makes a lot of the Shakespeare shit, like, you start with a typo or something. So like okay, well, there might be something on that line. And then when I look at where this guy's looking, I tried to do that. So I'm like, okay, this guy on the right is looking in this direction. I thought he was looking a little higher than where I went. But that's the only place where on the 40 and his eyesight, there's a waterway that stops, like the start of a waterway. So I'm like, I wonder if I find the source, that spot, like how accurate is this map? Can I actually find that spot? Is there something there? So I did that.
Well, I could go back to the 50-40 again.
Oh.
You never know.
Yeah.
Mentioning 40 again. Who knows? Did you check where 50 is on that map?
We don't have it.
All right.
It's somewhere else on the earth.
After you finish up making your point here, and you go to the next slide, just whenever you're finished up completing your point, I want to go back to this slide real quick because I see some really crazy
Excellent.
stuff.
Good. I was hoping you'd find some shit. Okay, so this is all that place. The only picture to ignore right now is the bottom right one. I'll explain why I think that might have some relevance, but you guys will probably tell me I'm stupid. Or no, sorry, not stupid, but maybe misguided a little bit. So this is where it got me to, is the Fairfax stone. And when you look at the plaque on it, this particular plaque states that, maybe George Washington placed it. A young George Washington. I've seen other places where they just straight up say, yeah, it was him. But this one opens it up to, like, we think it's him that placed this. And this is a headwater. This is the source of the river. This river is over 40 million years old. This is one of the oldest rivers in the world. So it's special. It's a meaningful waterway, and they've decided to find this one of its sources because it's massive, right? There's lots of streams and stuff that are going different directions, and they've decided to place an obelisk there, and this Fairfax stone. And I was looking at the layout of it, and if you look at the map, I did mark it. It's hard to tell. It's just a little gray map, but you can see the exactly where it sits on the Earth. And actually, it's 39 point something. It's not perfect on the 40th parallel, but it's close. So I did map it, and it's a little gray dot on the Google map top or middle of the map to the left there. You'll see a little gray dot if you're wondering where that river actually ends. But on this particular site, there's an obelisk. It's very damaged, but the thing I noticed about it that made me feel like this might actually be part of it is that it has the 40 on it and it has the 9 on it. I think it's missing stuff because it's damaged. Like, it looks like there's bullet holes or drill marks or something that happened to it, and it's missing a chunk. But just the way that the writing is lined up, there should be something to the left of the 9, above and to the left of the 9 that should have been there too, just for the symmetry of how they've put stuff down on the obelisk. So if there's something like a code here that's supposed to be part of it, I would say that it's kind of lost, unless you can find a picture of the full obelisk. The only thing I can think of why they would even bother doing this here, it made me think of this river in Cambodia, where you can see in the riverbed, it's got carved lingams, thousands of them on the riverbed. And it's a source of a river, of an important river for them, because it feeds all the farmlands. It does all these things. And the story there is that it's like to charge the water. It's like a blessing, so it's hypercharging this water so that it has better qualities to better nourish, their land or whatever. And so I thought maybe that's what they were doing, because I couldn't really think of another reason why they would go through that work. Why? And the thing that's interesting with the George Washington, going back to that first episode, we were talking about the historian Freemason. What's his fucking name? Forget his name right now. It'll come back to me. But he states that George Washington was the Freemason, was the Rosicrucian head of the United States at the time, and so that he put up a monument, an obelisk with the number 9 on it. To me, kind of links it back to what we've been dealing with the Shakespeare and the running around and stuff.
Right.
Yeah, so that's all I had for that. If you want me to go back here.
So that right underneath of the picture of bacon, what is, I can't read it, it's pretty small, but what is that?
The something spirit in colonization. I don't know.
To me, it's almost like, well, there's a lot going on with it. It could be a bit of a talisman, in my opinion, but you've got a bunch of different symbols that are all incorporated, especially the one right in the middle, right? That's got the sign for the sun. It's also got the sign for Mercury, and I think underneath of it they're suggesting Aquarius as well.
On the stamp?
What's that?
You're talking about the stamp?
No, right underneath of it.
Oh, okay.
So look at the very center symbol there. Looks like a circle, and then it's got like a half circle on top. It's got a little dot in the middle.
Yeah.
So that circle with the dot in the middle is the sign for the sun.
Mm-hmm.
And then the horns coming up out of it and then descending down into a cross, that's Mercury. And then underneath of that, you see it goes into like a little 2 humps, which in my opinion would represent Aquarius. If you look to the left of that, there's also the sign for Saturn. I mean, there's a bunch of, or Jupiter, there's a bunch of different signs in there too. And it's interesting to me that they combined those 3 symbols, especially with so much emphasis on Mercury, because Mercury is heavily associated with Virgo, Virginia, Virgo, right? And It also it's represented by the day Wednesday, which is funny because that's the day
Day
we're
of
on
Magic.
Perfect.
The Day of Magic as well.
now. Right.
Yeah.
I even
So-
have stuff I could add to those songs when you're done, looks too. So
And if you look, NY, I'm not sure if you can see this, but look real close. It's near the bottom. They spell out LVX.
Yeah.
oh yeah.
LVX
Yeah,
is
light.
it's light, right? But in that specific way that it's written, it also would go back to what is it? The hexagram ritual, LVX,
Oh yeah, yes, yep.
Yep.
The greater or lesser hexagram ritual will have that.
right? Where you're
Oh, yeah.
tracing those letters in the sky. Each one of those letters represents a god.
Well, that's the LVX
So-
formula too. I think technically.
Right. Which is
yeah.
different, which is separate than Luke's, which would be LUX. LVX is, as far as my knowledge, not the proper spelling of the word Lux or Luke's. So it's like it's an altered version of it specifically for, use in magical practice. LVX.
Well, I mean, now if we even go back to that the show, the documentary that you had mentioned, Marquis, I had checked that out, and the guy in that show does say that back in the day, letters, would sometimes U, V, and W would all sometimes like be interchangeable. Like they would use like a double V to make the W.
Yes.
Or like the U or the V sometimes would just be, switched out. And I think he was like making a point to show that maybe those may not always be like what Lux is saying. Maybe it's not correct, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
But the stuff I see, like now you had mentioned Aquarius, which I thought might have, it almost like it looks like a double arch thing, right?
Right.
Now, from my experience, and this is exactly how I try to explain it, and why I say it's different than the eclipse that I see from, that you would see up in the sky in my mind's eye. It's as if it's turned really a 45-degree angle, or no, a 90-degree angle, actually, and done the other way. Normally, when you see like the moon or whatever, it goes from, left to right, it waxes and wanes. Now, in my mind's eye, when I feel like I'm about to cross over, you see how it kind of looks like horns on that circle?
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's say that was just like another sphere and you were just bringing that down and it starts to look like, and let's say, that part underneath the horns is glowing. It would be as if like that eye is opening up again, as if that circle, that thing above it's just another circle coming off of like a light that's shining out and opening it up. That's exactly what it looks like to me.
Right, because then you have the sun right there at the exact spot where you're talking about.
And then once those horns go all the way up and the whole thing's illuminated, that's when you somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They definitely combined all three of those. Well, there's definitely more than three on the whole thing, but that one specifically in the center that we're talking about, they definitely combined those symbols for.
Yeah, and I even said in the Scarlet Whore, I think that Aquarius, people get misunderstood. It's saying, Aquarius is ruled by Saturn. Now, I think if you look at Aquarius, the symbol, all right, well, what would Aquarius be not being ruled anymore?
Mhm.
Well, he wouldn't be ruled by Saturn, who the Scarlet Whore represents as a cup holding water. Now you're wood, which is male energy, in a bucket overflowing. You are the male energy breaking out of the female energy.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
So
dude, there's so much on there. It's crazy. I really wish we could. If you get a chance, maybe try and send me that slide at some point. Like if you have that on a separate slide, I'm really interested in
this piece,
looking into it because I can't just.
I mean, even
can't
that thing
read
up
it.
in the left-hand corner of this map is wild as shit.
That's the thing you were talking about, the Metallica reference. you
Oh
made.
no, I was talking about something different actually. Than
Oh, I thought that's what you were talking
maybe
about.
I'll get the picture and I'll throw it in myself when I was talking about it if I can find it. No, completely different. It looks like a guy who's just sitting in a room all by himself. Like it's a small ass room. I think it's got like one window and he's got like a king, like a king's hat on, and it just reminded me of that fucking The Unforgiven. The same thing. The guy stuck in a room with this small little window that he carved out.
Okay. All right. So we'll skip those two. All right. So
Oh, you
this,
know what was interesting though with the date supposedly for that Fairfax stone?
yeah.
It adds up to 18. I mean, there'd be 9 times 2, 6 times 3.
Yeah.
You know, who knows?
Jeez.
I did want to throw that in there because you did have a lot of 9 going on with them. So
Yeah. Think.
you know, and
Yeah.
6 and 3 would be. I mean, you could look at that as
Oh,
B9.
jeez.
You could look at that as B9 and 6 times 3 and Son, which in my opinion would be 2 different versions of Jesus too. If you want to start getting into stuff like that, you know, that would be, I guess, Jesus and lightning, and then Jesus coming off the cross. You know.
Okay. It's crazy. I don't have much to say about this. This is just a piece of work that I found that I don't know if you, like the rose cross on the side. I think they use this as a board. There's a specific name for it. But I don't know if there's anything worth mentioning, especially the one on the right. I don't know what these wheels are about. I know the guy that did the Shakespeare folio documentary. Like, I saw him looking down at books that had similar types of wheels on them. They never talk about it, but I just don't understand this at all. I don't know if it's interesting or not, but I thought it was a nice work. I just don't know what it is, but it's a Rosicrucian thing. But I like it has that triangle, that 90-degree triangle again.
Yeah. A lot of those symbols, it's representing the Wheel of Fortune. Sort of like I was, you know, it's talking about different ages or aeons. Okay. So it's often represented as a wheel in the tarot because, you know, it's a Wheel of Fortune, but it's sort of describing how, you know, we have these different seasons, not only on Earth, but in a much higher, like a galactic scale. So
you could potentially use this wheel to kind of see what's coming up.
Oh, yeah.
I think what how did we say it before? I said it was reminded me of the Hunger Games when they realized that they were in a fucking matrix and a clock was like, you know, that nerdy guy realized that they, you know, started paying attention and started realizing that there was a system going on here. I think that's for that, and I truly do believe a lot of times when people get confused by people with pizza, they're referring to this because it's the same amount of slices when you look at the Wheel of Fortune. You know, and you know, I mean, look, it looks like the same thing that people use on boats when they want to fucking, you know, go wherever they're going on this, you know, on the ocean, on the waters, on the abyss.
Right.
I mean,
and dude, I'll tell you, I mean, just to tell you how seriously the Golden Dawn takes the Wheel of Fortune and things like that. I mean, we had a literal computer program that was for us, that we would sit down and you would take your birth date and time of year that you're in. I mean, all this different information, you'd feed it into this program, and it would more or less give you feedback on what type of magical practices you needed to do for whatever reason you needed to do it. Oh, maybe this month I want a little bit more money, you know, maybe I want to find a new job, something like that. And they would all feed it into this program, and then you would get it all fed back out to you depending on the Wheel of Fortune, current position on the Wheel of Fortune.
Yo, I believe it or not, I even think this is gonna sound crazy. I don't want to go into it too long, but I even think that whole thing with Putin handing off the soccer ball to Trump, I honestly believe that's all an occult symbol. And I think Trump, if you look at Trump as being the Wheel of Fortune, that would make the picture make a whole lot of sense. I think that shows him being, you know, being handed the all-seeing eye or going up to Binah. That's my opinion. Which would be the next step from the Wheel of Fortune.
Right.
And just a little side thing I wanted to add about Enoch, just because they use a lot of Enochian magic. The story, and I'm not very well versed with the Bible, so correct me if I'm saying something wrong, but the way I understand it is Enoch was the only guy that ascended to the throne or by the side of God without dying. So he actually chose, like, today I'm out, and through his practice he was able to ascend without death. So as far as I understand, he's the only biblical character to have ever been able to do that. So I find it interesting that he has that ability. It would make sense to me that you would want to follow his teachings if you're trying to do similar things for humanity or for yourself, or, you know, because they're always talking about evolution and ascending and that kind of stuff. So.
There's another one, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but there's another dude that just shoots right up too.
Okay.
I can't remember his name though. Dude, when it comes to the Bible, it's like Hagabakiah or some.
This was just some more Rosicrucian history from that early time period. I find this interesting to me. This Kelpius community that existed in Pennsylvania, that came from Germany, and that the Rosicrucian on public land were able to post up this plaque, talk of where this cave still exists, one of the caves still exists, and that it's Amrock that's in Pennsylvania, with association with what do they say it on the plaque here, that they co-loving soul, master of the first, anyways, the Grand Lodge Rosicrucians. Yeah.
Amorc in there.
What is
Yeah.
It says Amorc.
Yeah, Amorc is one of the Rosicrucian orders.
But they're on the West Coast, right?
They are on the West Coast. They tend to be more focused there, but they do if you want to attend, it's like their School of Magic, you can get paperwork sent to you in the mail and stuff like that. But
I knew somebody who did that actually. That went to the OTO. They're in Amorc, and they
really
did it through the mail. I think. Yeah, because I don't think this person was going over to the West Coast for this shit.
Right.
Well, I know that the Amrock, or when they came out, were very much hated by another Rosicrucian order from New York, because of that exact thing you're saying, putting ads out in magazines and shit to say for people to join.
Mm-hmm.
And so they tried to discredit that person. I forget his name, but I just found it surprising that they're allowed to put this signage up. And Amrock, sorry, I know I'm mispronouncing it there, but those guys weren't around in 1673.
Right. The Fraternitatis Rosicrucis, though, which is in Pennsylvania and claims to be the oldest Rosicrucian order in the United States, they were, potentially at that time. So,
yeah. So it's interesting that there's these different Rosicrucian orders on this same plaque, taking credit for this Kelpius community that were like, they thought the world was ending at the with the new millennium. And so they were kind of doing preparations for that. And there's this really sweet poster I found at the site. Just another Monday in the caves, hanging out with Kelpius. This little boy's having a good time in the corner. I don't even know what they're. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, what a great day that kid's having. Fucking terrified in the corner with the parents just chilling there.
Right. Yeah.
He's holding the torch, the light up. Like, that makes me think of Father RC's light,
Yeah.
A little bit.
See that this goes back to stuff that, like, how I would even see this. No, I don't know if is that a male and a female behind him?
I feel like that's the parents, maybe.
I can see how, I say that technically the way how I look at it, and why I think sometimes reverse stuff is used, why child or children might be put in certain depictions like this. It has nothing to do with pedophile shit. But in my opinion, when you were crossing over, in a sense, you were going back in time. You were going back to where, childlike, you're going back to before you ended up in the womb. You were going back before all that crap happened. Before you got birthed into this world, before you were in your fucking mother's womb, you're going back before all of that and back to spirit before you got shot into this world. So showing a child now walking back there with the fucking light in his hand, to me, could just represent, the separation from this world and going back to the source.
Yeah,
you got the illuminating light with you, going back towards to where you came from.
Well,
it has nothing to do with fucking kids, and people take it that way.
Well, it's also literally the image of the Plato's allegory of the cave, which tells the same story that you just said. It's just Plato's version of it.
Yeah. Interesting. And instead, if you look at it too, he's going to the right-hand side, not to the left.
Right.
Yeah, so just more RC history. So now we're going to skip ahead. So I'm skipping over a couple hundred years. I'm sure there's plenty of involvements. And I'll mention this here too, because it's going to get a little bit difficult to discern groups and stuff. Like I don't necessarily say like Rosicrucians are behind all of the worlds, like the way the world is right now. Like, yeah, at the beginning of this and the new world and all that stuff, like they played a major part, but I don't know that there isn't someone behind them. I don't know that isn't like 10, or I would say I'm sure that there's at least 10, 20, 40 other groups all perpendicular to them doing the same kind of work, right, with different names and stuff like that. So just so people know, like I'm not saying that they're behind everything, but we will skip a little bit ahead to more of a present time, and we're going to start like 1800s, early 1900s, and where I kind of found them, and I think this is an important part and is informative to kind of what we're seeing these days. So I
remember
quotes.
When you brought this up, I thought this was important. I thought this was very interesting. So I know you told me you were going to get into this prior.
Yeah. This is where things become a bit more of a bummer, to be honest, with some of this information.
No, but it's still it's still very interesting, though. You know, it's just,
it is.
Where do we get these ideas from? You never know.
And I think it touches more of us than we realize, and I'll get to that after. So this what we're looking at is Margaret Sanger. She was instrumental in the abortion movement, women's rights in a way, but a lot of those women's rights leaders started before she was around and had issues with her because she was very militant, especially in her early days. She was about doing pretty much whatever. Like at this point, if she did those things today, she'd be a terrorist. The stuff that she was doing. And you usually see her as this old lady. And I use this picture on the far right because you might find this exact picture, but it's been fucked with, and it's showing her at a Ku Klux rally doing this symbol with that book and stuff. It's not real. This is the real picture of her. You know what I mean? Like, yes, she did go to a rally and speak, but she didn't pose in that way and did that thing. Like that was never a real thing. She's plenty fucking racist. You don't need to make up stories. And we're going to see some of that. So you can see some of her quotes here and how she thinks if people are interested, they can kind of look at that. And these are some of the subjects that we're going to be talking about with her. And I want to start a little bit with her childhood. And I think this is a thing that's overlooked a lot when we're dealing with these groups, is like the human version of them, like what happened to them that gets them to this place. And this lady was incredibly traumatized as a young person, and so you can kind of see why she ended up the way she kind of ended up through what happened to her in her childhood and stuff. So when she was young, I think she was like 6 or 7, her brother dies at the age of 4. And her father believed in phrenology. And back in these days, there's tons of weird science. Like Darwinism happens and shit explodes. All these new sciences happen, including eugenics and stuff, and we'll hit on that, come out of this Darwinism. And one of these things, this phrenology, it's like, it lays out the brain. Different parts of your brain have different attributes, and it goes into things like if your ears are big, you have big lobes, that indicates something. How far your eyes are apart, balding, like all of these things have indications to your total value as a human being. Oh. And so that picture at the top kind of shows that's from one of their works back in the day, kind of showing where the different parts of the brain and what that means. So they would like measure your skull and do all of these things, and that would mean a lot. So he was into this shit, and he was very active in the same way that she was in terms of fighting for rights and stuff. So labor unions, things like that was a huge deal back then, and he was part of that, and he was part of secret society. It's hard to find a lot of information exactly what the group was about and how deep he goes in the group. I would say not very much, because he didn't live very well, but he was part of some societies. I don't know that they're linked back to Rosicrucians though, as she becomes later on. So believe that the human face is a reflection of transcendent soul. So that's like the easy way of looking at it. Sorry, I just want to make sure I'm not going through too much. So so she's growing up in this world. Her kid brother dies, and her dad decides, what a great opportunity for us to go on a little jaunt to his grave at night after he was just buried and dig him up. And so he brings his daughter to do this. She has to participate in his getting him out of the ground because he wants to make a plaster mask of the kid's face, and cuts some of his hair and shit and puts it into the plaster.
As one does.
Why wouldn't you? And I found a link to that weird behavior, not exactly like that, but a version of that all the way back to Mesopotamia, where there were cults doing that shit. But they would live with them. They would actually keep them in the house or whatever. Yeah, so I don't know if that's what he links, but that's the only thing I can think of that I can make sense of why you would do that. Like there has to be some sort of cultural or religious belief behind what he's doing. Anyway, so she had to do that, and in her writings, it appears that he also raped her that night, and that he was doing a lot of that to her. So she seemed to be like a victim of like satanic ritual abuse and shit. At minimum, she was being molested. So she had a really fucked up upbringing, and it's just a lot of that shit with her in her childhood and her parents and stuff. So I thought we'll say one of her little quotes here. So all the menacing evils that spring out of this sinisterly fertile soil are the surest signs that our civilization has bred, is breeding, and perpetuating constantly increasing numbers of defective delinquents and dependents. And this is from the socialist newspaper out in New York at the time that she was quoted saying that. And the reason I put this up is like whenever anyone decides to look her up, and what a lot of apologists say is like she wasn't racist, she was something different. If you actually read the works of people, including eugenicists and stuff like that, when they use those words are not meant for everyone. Those are words that they use for Black people, they use for immigrants, minorities, and shit like that. And that's, to me, is undisputable that these words are synonymous with races, is what she's referring to. And yeah, that does include like, people that have mental deficiencies and shit like that. But that's, if you really study her and shit, that's skin deep, and it's incredibly racist, the stuff that she says. So while I personally believe in the sterilization of the feeble-minded, the insane, the syphilitic, I have not been able to discover that these measures are more than superficial deterrents when applied to the constantly growing stream of unfit. They are excellent means of meeting a certain phase of the situation, but I believe in regards to these, as in regards to other eugenic means, that they do not go to the bottom of the matter. Neither the mating of healthy couples nor the sterilization of certain recognized types of the unfit touches the great problem of unlimited reproduction of those who housing, clothing, and food are all inadequate to physical and mental health.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. So she's clearly like, that's a perfect quote. She's agreeing with the eugenicists. The eugenicists are racist to the core, and she wants, I mean, she works hard to try to get in good terms with them and join them as an organization because they were so popular. But yeah, it just shows right there, I think, all the racism that you can, hope for, and that what she's actually about is depopulation. right? Like they're talking about like there's and this was a very common thing back then. It's like way too many immigrants, way too many people, and the top of the civilization don't reproduce the same way. So when we do abortions, like a lot of people didn't want abortions, even eugenicists and stuff wouldn't fucking touch it. Like she was so fringe that even the eugenicists didn't want to touch her. You know, it's like, that's how unpopular this shit was back then.
Wow.
You know, so there's letters of her talking with people, and they're all like, "Yeah, man, like we're in on it, but we can't say publicly. We'll help you behind the scenes until people are ready. I'll help you get people mentally ready for this, but I'm not going to put my name on it yet." So there's a lot of that happening early on for her.
You know, I even think stuff like this. You know, I do believe in some way, you know, like we've mentioned before, we think a lot of secret societies do kind of work together, but I do think there may be maybe also like two different trains or ideas of thought too, where you can see maybe where they have issues. I think some might like like me. I guess in my opinion, I'd rather, like, let's say we are in a matrix or in a dome, I'd prefer to break it and free all of us. You know what I'm saying? So some people might see that way, or some people might see it as like it's a prison. We're not going to be able to get out of it, and if there's no more prisoners, it won't be open anymore. You know what I'm saying? If there's no prisoners, the prison, there's no reason for it.
Right.
So, you know, is it, you know, just like when we said people killing their own kids to Quetzalcoatl, and I've said, you know, for all you know, those people did that because they really believed. And I'm not saying it's right, but that could be something behind it. They actually believe, like, fuck, I just birthed somebody into this fucking world I know is a jail cell and is hell, and there's no reason for this. And they just, you know, remove them from it themselves.
Right.
You know, I really think there is a mindset. There's a mindset with that, and I do think that that is two things that sometimes you might see differences in opinions and why, you know, maybe not wars, but like, you know, occult, you know, disagreements maybe.
Mm-hmm. So here's another quote of hers: "Before eugenicists and others who are laboring for racial betterment can succeed, they must first clear the way for birth control. Like the advocates of birth control, the eugenicists, for instance, are seeking to assist the race towards the elimination of the unfit. Both are seeking a single end, but they lay emphasis upon different methods." Kind of goes back to what you were saying. So, right, you're seeing the words like unfit used with eugenicists. Like, eugenicists are not so much worried about the unfit. They're, yes, but it's race based, right? If you study, so just so people can kind of get the grasp that, like, when we're using these words, they're interchangeable with any kind of degradation towards another race and stuff. They're synonymous together for that stuff.
Well, that's also a perfect way to keep people off, is to make them think that there's, you know, that there's a difference, and, you know, you'll just kill each other. We don't even have to do it.
Yeah. Right. And so even way back before the pill, before all this shit, before the clinics, like, before the Nazis, there was a global movement with race, and it was a problem and people were scared. And so in the United States, and I learned this doing the research, I didn't realize there was such a thing as the American race. But back then there was. And the way they explain, and this is where Margaret Sanger falls in, this is how she considers herself okay, because she's Irish. And back then, again, Irish people were very much next to like being black or something. They did not like the Irish. They were trying to wipe them out. I don't know if I'll mention it, so I'll just mention it now. Like the potato famine, they use it as a case study of how great it is to do genocide. And they talk about how they perpetuated that problem for years because of what it did for them. It got rid of a lot of them. So they say, like, because we even just by making it longer and making the problem worse, we got rid of 2 million of them, extra millions that we would have had to deal with now. And now that gave up all the land. Yeah, they didn't have food, but we had tons. And this is how they describe it. Like, we were at our best when they were at their worst. And I mean, if you look at the jab now, there's a lot of that. Like, all these small businesses lose out. It's awful for everyone, but then the elites are reaping the benefits of it. So it's very much that same kind of, I think, cycle we're seeing with this stuff.
Yeah, that's what I've been saying that over and over again. Even to like family and friends and stuff. And I probably said it on the show. What I've watched, what I think I'm watching happening is basically we are being given less options of where we're getting our drugs and our food from. That's not good.
It's not
Because
good.
we're seeing fucking pharmacies and supermarkets close down. We're losing options of where to eat and where to get our drugs.
And so they're playing at the same shit. And one of the things I wanted to say with the American race part and why she puts herself there and why that's important for her if she's going to survive in the eugenics world is she is the old American. So her family, like she's doing this shit when her family got fucked over and came here because of the potato famine.
Wow.
She's using her tactics that were used against her and her family and devastated her family clearly. Like, look at the fucked up life they had to live. And she's doing it again to other races, right? So for her, it's like, yeah, I'm Irish, but my family survived coming out here when there was nothing. Only the hardy survived. Like my brother died, like other people in my family died. Everyone's dying around, so only the strong survive. This is a strong genetic pool that we need to keep going. And we can't do that if we have all these other immigrant families taking over that don't have that. They just showed up, everything's there for them, they're weak genetically. So that's how she gets out of being one of those inferior races, which the Irish were at the time, because she's old stock. And that's how that's how you can create an American race when really it's all of Europe into one place. But you know what, guys, we're the same now because we survived that first 100 years or whatever. So she's also the first person to organize and be well, I don't know how much she had a lot to do with it, but anyways, the first World Population Conference held in Geneva, Switzerland, and she's on the board. And this starts, and it wasn't the United Nations, it was the League of Nations, which turns into the United Nations. So this kind of just shows you that they've been working with the UN since before the UN was even a thing on population control and stuff. These things still exist. And it's chock full of eugenicists and shit like that, this place. And so before we go more into this is similar kind of time frame. This is where we've mentioned them a few times here. The Pennsylvania crew of Rosicrucians. This is their headquarters. The map on the left, that you can see Beverly Hall Corporation, where they print the books and shit, and then where the pyramid's located on that same kind of plot of land there. And that's his pyramid. And then I've put some pictures of some of the stuff that you see inside the pyramid. And the thing I noticed with them is their logos in terms of in terms of Rosicrucians seems very unique in a lot of ways.
Yeah, they're very different compared to other groups, surprisingly. Especially,
right,
I have some
stuff.
Yeah, I've got some literature on them, their own literature. And the way that they approach things is way different than other secret societies I've seen.
Interesting. So part of their literature that you're just mentioning, top right corner, that's a page from one of the books that they decide to print from their 68th convocation that they had in 1916. So these are some of the things that they were discussing that year. They thought it was a lot of good stuff, so they wanted to put it into a book. And actually, one of your Discord people actually provided this for me. Serendipitously, like I put something up there, and he then immediately posted this up while I was trying to do some research for you guys, and it was like the perfect thing I needed. It was weird, man.
It's weird.
So
there was a point that I did notice. Like, I think I might have even seen that because I remember like seeing like I think something happening where like somebody posted up something to go along with somebody else dropped, and I just happened to notice that, and I was like, oh, that's the stuff I love, is like watching somebody else like respond and be like, oh, look at this too, And I do see that in the Discord a lot, which makes me happy to have it.
It makes me happy too, dude, because you're always apprehensive to put anything up, right? Especially like a lot of this stuff, I feel like you're very much alone. You feel very much alone when you're doing it. And so to have somebody else like take the time to read something you put and help with something like,
Oh,
yeah, I
no,
think
there's
it's
a lot of
fucking
people I think, in
dope,
that
man.
group that do that, yeah, which is
Yeah,
pretty
it makes me
fucking
feel
wild.
bad. Like I need to do more of it for others if I could. But so this, so the things that they talked about, I'll just, without going deep into it, but some of the main discussion points and chapters in this book is discussing the code of ethics for schools and will fight for it, mind, body, and with the last drop of blood. That's like what they say. So they're trying to get into schools, evolution reinforced by conscious development, if inherited by all the world, would become paradise within a few generations. Want to bring back Egyptian style of rule and government, conscious individuals ruled by one supreme head, who also became an individual, an initiate who also has been crowned king or ruler. That sounds like Nazism to me. If you look at the Nazi story, like Hitler was exactly that. Like he was blind through mustard gas, and it was in his head though, and he got hypnotized by this doctor. I forget his name. Someone just has been doing some great work about that stuff. But he was essentially like he was hypnotized, and they never broke the hypnotism. And if you look at the stuff that they were hypnotizing him with, you could see why he thought he was like this great ruler, because they put that into him to cure him from blindness, right? The hypnosis was to cure him from blindness, to get his psychosis out. And so they put these thoughts of, you know, average, like miracles don't happen for average people, but you're not an average person. You can do this. You can get out of this situation that you're in and become more than that. You know, the greatest men can overcome and don't have to like bow down to science or whatever. And then so he's, you know, anyways, they cured his blindness. It happened to him twice. But and if you look at the people surrounding, the people that propped him up, all of these things, like it's incredibly occulted, like they're saying here, like you know, it's an initiate, like it's an initiate that's been put king by other initiates to bring upon all of these fucking things that Rosicrucians are constantly talking about. So yeah, it just felt very much like this is like early Nazism ideas. I don't know what you guys think about that, but
I mean, that's a very interesting idea. I had someone on my show once. This is all I'm going to say about it. Is I think it was Dean Reiner, and he does mention himself. He says, I think a lot of the driving force or the occultism or the dark stuff behind Nazism and World War II, I don't think most people even have any idea where that's even coming from. And if we don't know that, how do we not know it's still going on now? So, I mean, it's totally possible, man, because I don't think we really know much about what really went down with that. Even from the occultism that I understand from behind it, I don't think most people even realize.
Yeah.
You know, and I still don't understand. Like, you get an idea, but I don't know who was the grand architect behind this. I have no fucking idea. You have no idea.
Yeah, that's one of the most frustrating parts I find. It's always like a dead end at some point. It feels like, but
I mean,
this
you'll get
is
a couple of breadcrumbs here and there, but you really don't know. You know what I'm saying?
right.
And so I'm open to that. It's like it very well be a possibility.
So this is still on the grounds. This was an article I found of this family doing a patronage to this place. Yeah, this little daughter. They're looking at, apparently this is an actual 2,000-year-old Nike statue. I don't know how significant it is, why they would have a Nike statue, if you guys had an idea about that, but
I mean, it
doesn't mean much to me.
Death.
Yeah.
That's why I thought that was really interesting. I mean, it's missing the head too, which to me represents the separation of the mind from the body.
Right.
Which
And,
would be the death, I think, comes, with magic.
Okay. The other article I noticed was in 1989. I guess some of the followers like the leader was gone and they took over the building. And they like barred themselves in, changed the logs, like did all this
Wow.
shit. I don't know what the fuck was happening, but there was some more wizard fighting going on over there at some point.
That's so funny. That's so funny.
Yeah, I thought that shit was funny too. And like just the person talking about it, like, and then they told me to do this. And, yeah, it's interesting. This is a book I was only able to find 2-3 pages of it, but this is a book about doing a pilgrimage to Beverly Hall. And they mention that they're the only ones that has this particular type of park. I apologize, I forget the name of what they call it, but they're like, it is the only one in the world at the time. This was 1916 when they in that book they mentioned that this is the only park in the world like it, and it had a specific kind of thing to it. And now there's also pilgrimage to this place. So I feel like there's something about that. But yeah, I thought that, you know, one of the books that they do print over there.
Yeah, they do that like once a year. They pilgrimage to Beverly Hall. But also, there's one thing that is very unique to this organization is that they recreated the exact Seal of Solomon at an exact geological location of their that was very important as far as like getting into like the ley lines and energy and stuff like that, right? Even if you look at the globe that they have that represents the FRC, the globe has grids on it. So they, really buy into the idea that certain areas on the Earth are more charged or have more magical potential. And so they put it was like this, I was reading about it a while ago, but they spent years developing this seal and did a giant ritual on top of this seal. And they're pretty proud of it. They put pictures all over their website and stuff about it.
That even makes me think about Enochian magic in itself, even like where you had that that thing's done in a square. The Enochian tablets is in a square, and like kind of like that map you were showing before, like, who's to say, like, if you're like, let's say if you wanted to on some certain part of the tablet, you wanted to, do whatever with that thing there, like, is there a way to represent that somewhere like on a map? Because Crowley and other people have gone to specific places to do Enochian rituals.
So
Is
just
there
a
a connection maybe like to where you're trying to go? Because like even in the hexagram ritual, if you want to specifically invoke a planet, they do recommend for you to actually know where that planet is and to make the 5th hexagram that place in the sky and charge that as well. So right. I mean, could you be taking spots off of the tablet that would match up to a map and going places like ley lines, like what you were getting at?
Yeah.
So that's an interesting thing you guys bring up. I'll mention a few things on that. One thing I realized I didn't mention is the plaque here. I've gone back quite a few slides there, but those plaques, that Gematria leads to that Oak Island where we're seeing that top corner tree of life with the Northern Cross through it. Right. And if you follow that Northern Cross straight all the way back towards Europe where it's pointing, it actually goes through directly in the middle of a castle known to be a Templar castle, and you follow that like straight in the middle of it. You follow it, continue, and it goes right to Temple Mount.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
that's interesting.
Yeah, and then when you look at that tarot card, top right corner, that roof. If you were to think of that roof, like looking at it from above and drew it, it would have like, circles. It would have like a square with circles, right? On the ends. Mm-hmm. Okay. So somebody called, I forget his exact name, Susquehanna Warrior, I feel like saying something like that. Anyways, he took that and he put it on the map, not this one, but like a real map of this same area. And he found shit. Like there's specific building, and there's even like one of the spots is an actual, like where it's in the middle of all of it is an actual, like, I think like ceremonial spot, and it's a park that was made Super interesting. Susquehanna Warrior, I think he has quite a few interesting videos about that, but he does what you guys are just saying. Like he put that thing down and it lines up to stuff, which is super interesting. Okay.
Yeah, they also, that just real quick, that group, the FRC that we're talking about, they have a lot of people. If you really want to look into this more, dig into their website, because they have same thing, secret societies within secret societies, and one of the names of the subgroups is the Order of the Magi, and another subgroup is they call themselves like Knights, Templar Knights. So they openly talk about that as well.
Yeah, that seems to be a thing. I notice a lot of groups want to link themselves to the Templar, so I have a hard time understanding where to believe. Like the Rosicrucians, same thing. Like they all link themselves back to the Templar. The thing that's interesting with the triple tau that they use a lot, like the Templars would like it as well, but they would use it as a TH. So Templum Hierusalima. Sorry. But yeah, anyways, just more interesting Templar shit. So when we start looking at now, like, okay, we've got her. She's growing up. She grew up fucked up, Sanger, but she's in the movement and she's constantly kind of rustling feathers and getting herself in trouble and stuff. And so there's some things that are happening in that time with the eugenics whole movement. So and these names are constantly intertwined with her, either directly or indirectly, through things that we now know that weren't public. But yeah, so I think it's just worth mentioning some of these guys. So Madison Grant's a big one. He kind of created the racialist movement in American history. And he worked pretty much like that's kind of what he did for a long period of time. He was sorry, I forgot. He chaired a bunch of stuff. I'm trying to find it, but a lot of his closest associates, like he knew presidents, top industrialists, best-selling writers, things along those lines were all very much part of what he did. And he was a descendant of the Jacobites, which I thought was interesting.
Yo, that's who the fucking, oh my God, an Outlander. The dude that chick is with has something to do with the Jacobites.
Perfect.
Holy fuck, dude. Yo, that is insane.
That's crazy.
Yo,
Perfect.
what the fuck? Yo, she, I think, follows his, like, knows from history. She knows from history because, I mean, well, she was a nurse, obviously. Back in World War II, maybe she actually just, like, was smart and, like, read. Maybe weren't so dumb back then. And she actually, like, kind of knew a little bit of history and knew the story of the Jacobites. And the guy that she ended up with, I think, was a part of the Jacobites, and she was trying to make things end up better in his favor than I think it was in history.
That's right. That's interesting because that group of people that's more people they were claiming divine right.
Holy fuck. Yo, that is wild, dude.
Yeah. So he's a Yale graduate, a Columbia graduate. And that's something you see with all of these top figures in this world. They're all Ivy League people. Laid the groundwork for his research. So yeah, so he's a big part of the groundwork for the eugenics and the science of eugenicism. Edward Rouse. So sociology in the United States. One of the first sociologists to pursue comprehensive sociological theory, right? So these are guys that, it trips me out to think that these are the people that we base so much of like how we understand things. So here's this old stock stuff and a quote for him. So old stock Americans were committing race suicide to be replaced by more fertile immigrant races. The same fear was felt by so-called English Canadians. Now I can touch on that part a little bit. I'm Canadian. I'm French Canadian. And this is where it becomes important for everyone, where it's not just black or white, but there's a very much a class-based system, and eugenics incorporates that, right? It's not just race, although it's major. It's the easiest way, right, to determine someone's lesser than you is by their race, but it goes deeper than that, and it goes like The Irish weren't safe. The French Canadians weren't safe. Our native population is starting to come out now, the crazy shit they did, right? But this all comes from the same thing. And these systems were in place in the United States and then Canada way before the Germans ever did anything like it. They came here to learn from us how to do these things. And we'll touch a little bit on that. But so just something interesting to keep in mind when it comes to these, like, it's so divided by race, where I really don't feel like that's the key part that people need to focus on. It's the elites versus the not elites. And that can look 1,000 different fucking ways. So the blame was supposedly inferior immigrant races, and it's on women for having sex and having these babies and stuff. So they're worried about controlling race suicide. And at that time, what they noticed is people that were willing to do abortions were generally the richer, higher classes. So those higher classes were not having large enough families. And the poor classes, immigrant classes, were not willing to do it because it was illegal and shit. And so they had a lot more fears based upon doing this on a wide scale. So they realized early that by legalizing it would actually open the doors to a lot more people being open to doing this. The people that we actually want doing this to actually go through with it. And so there's a bit of a back and forth between Sanger, and she's constantly looking for them to like take her into their team and stuff. So here's a letter that she kind of shared. So I feel that I can do more by massing the statistics so as to prepare people's mind for the birth control idea than I can by, this is Edward Ross writing to Sanger, that I can by advocating birth control in so many words. I don't want people to form the impression that my studies in population pressure are made in order to justify my birth control view. So I think that my policy of leading people up to the idea rather than advocating it in so many words will accomplish more in the long run. And so Sanger writes back, for although you hesitate to become openly one of our vice presidents, we are very glad to think you as converted and interested. He became chairman of the National Committee of the American Civil Liberties, serving until 1950. Right? So these are the guys that are in charge of civil fucking liberty.
Sounds like just sounds like
that sounds about right. So yeah, go ahead.
No, you're good. You're good.
Okay. So now the Rockefellers kind of show up. A lot of the presidents along those time frames all help out. So I'm not partisan in any way. I will name some presidents, but if it sounds partisan, it's really not. I think it's all of them. I couldn't find one that didn't have something to do with this shit. So in the mid-20s, John D. Rockefeller anonymously donates $10,000 to the American Birth Control League to fund research into contraceptive. Birth Control League was before Planned Parenthood. This was the first one. Wow. Same people. So they were doing it on the low for a long time. And then the son, John D. Rockefeller III, continued what his father did, but did it more publicly. And so the Rockefeller brothers fund gave money to Planned Parenthood up until 1991 officially. So they could have, right? Like you can see like when the public opinion is high, they're public. And now we're seeing there's been a lot of backlash. And so now they're under the radar with it again. But I mean, the government's fully funding Planned Parenthood all the way through, and we'll see that stuff. Sir Francis Galton, a cousin of Charles Darwin, initiated the Western eugenics movement by suggesting that traits like talent and character could be passed down to children through intentional breeding. Several British and American academics latched onto the idea, including figures like Theodore Roosevelt, Rockefellers, Graham Bell. Sanger's support for sterilizing the disease or the feeble-minded legitimized birth control movement by aligning her ideas with those of contemporary intellectuals, the eugenicists. I think this is a little bit of, again, trying to minimize who she is in terms of, she's just trying to get help. So she has to do these things. Right. That's a lot of when you read about Sanger these days. Like that's the kind of shit they say to justify her behaviors or thoughts. So from a newspaper, proposed mandatory birth control should be used as a tool to eliminate the menace to the white race created by increased black population. Quota system for right to have children based on race. He was on the Council of American Birth Control League that became Planned Parenthood. Just to show him that it's baked in. So they're trying to figure this shit. So Procter and Gamble get involved, of course, yeah, with the Negro Project, which is fucking out of this world.
Wow.
And so part of their problem is like they're slowly gaining grounds with abortions and shit. Like she opened her first clinic in Brooklyn illegally, and so she had a lot of problems. But
Big as Brooklyn.
Pardon me?
Big as Brooklyn.
Of course, she just wants to help poor people, right? It has nothing to do with the fact that it's where all the immigrants are.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So that one of the things they notice is like they need black leaders. So this describes how they're actively recruiting black people, propagandizing them so that they can convince other black people or other minorities to listen to them. So although they didn't want black doctors in the room with them and stuff, they knew they needed them to convince the others to come in. And so they have this plan of doing that. And they do this with black leaders, and they do it with black religious leaders as well. Trying to get like into churches and get pastors to back it, which some do. So they understood really early that they needed like Uncle Tom, whatever, that kind of situation happening for them, which I think says a lot, but yeah. I don't know if there's anything you guys want to add with that stuff, but
no, I mean, you can just see it now. I mean, it's still the same strategy.
Yeah. Like if you look at where all these Planned Parenthood clinics are, it's like overwhelming, like 95% are all in ethnic neighborhoods, like all in these neighborhoods. And you might say like, well, they're poor, these are poor neighborhoods and stuff, but like that's a whole other things of why that's the case. It's like they try to turn into like the chicken and the egg thing, when clearly their documentation from the get-go says no, like we are targeting these communities purposefully because we're worried about the race imbalance. Catherine McCormick. So this broad here, she's the one that got the money involved for the pill. That took a lot of fucking money, a fortune. And she's the one that gave up the most of it. And the reason she was able to do this is because her wealthy husband that she married into this wealthy family, they made money off like plows or something, like farming technology that they had patents on. So they were like crazy wealthy. And once that husband died, then she immediately calls Sanger or writes her saying like, hey, what should I do with all my money? Well, I have a great idea. Let's make this fucking pill. So that, right? Because again, they do studies and they know that like if they want to get as many people of these minorities to do it, they need the pill. So she decides to give the money, and the story behind this family is out of this world. Like her husband was, I have the book. It's called it's described as a fictional book, but the author says that the majority of the book is actually factual, and the craziest things in the book are the things that are definitely true. you know, he has to skirt the subject. And this is a tactic that you do see a lot of, like, even spies and shit will write books and they'll write it as a book of fiction so that they can skirt around the problems with saying it outright. So it's called River Rock. And this book, essentially, like, this guy, he had like, some of the stories, like, she had to chain him and he had to wear, like, I think, like, metal underwear and get chained so that he didn't jerk off at night. Or and he had, like, a pet orangutan or chimpanzee, I think, actually, that, you know, he had interesting relationships with. So this guy was, like, super super unstable dude with an interesting kind of family background. But without this lady, we don't have the pill. And when you look into how they developed the pill, like, they fucking killed people. They go to a place that was super popular for doing this because there were no real rights for these people. Was what's that island that you guys own?
Virgin Islands? We don't know.
Yeah, it's around there. It's Puerto Rico.
Oh, yeah.
So that's where they are, doing some testing. And if you look at these vaccine companies and you follow where they did their testing, you'll follow a trail of death and shit, because the way they go about it is fucking out of this world, right? Because they don't understand dosage, they don't really care, and so they find places where there's no real human rights, so they can do these things and convince, like, full villages to take part.
Oh, fuck.
So yeah, so she gives up all that money. They get a doctor, a scientist involved, and they figure out how the pill. And the guy that made the pill said, like, I don't give a shit about the morality of it or anything. I just cared about the science, and that's how he explained it.
It's very crazy to me that they name it. The name of the book is River Rock.
Why is that?
Goes back to what we were talking about earlier. The monument, the George Washington monument in the river, River Rock. Remember? It's just weird. Could be a coincidence, but maybe it's
Fairfax Park.
Yeah. And just so you guys know, the author, he has a picture on the back of the cover. I'm just noticing it now, but half of his face is shadowed, so you can't see the left side of his face.
Yeah, and the previous slide that you just had up, she mentioned Shakespeare too, right after it's talking about River Rock, which is ironic to me. It is a true story, but I'm telling my version the way Shakespeare told his version of the English history in the Henry plays.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's a nod to Rosicrucianism, you would think, but okay. So this is an interesting document. So this is a document that came out, National Security Council report. I think this was a White House paper that got declassified, and it essentially, it's laying out. So this is 1974. It's laying out the plan for global population control. Right, because even though the Nazis and all that shit's over, and, like, the upfront racism, eugenics thing is breaking apart. Although in 1974, I'm pretty sure there were still a few eugenic branches open in the United States. I think Oregon was the last place to have one. They had one way too fucking long. So some of the things that they're talking about doing. So reduction in birth rates affects total number only slowly. Right, so they're trying to figure out how to do these things. Policies to reduce fertility will have their main effects on total numbers only after several decades. It is urgent that the measures to reduce fertility be started and made effective in the 70s and 80s. Most demographers, including the UN and the US population councils, right, the same fucking councils and shit that shouldn't exist anymore, regard the range of 10 to 13 billion as kind of like where we can be stable, and this assumes that we have food for all this. So they didn't even seem scared of food. The story about shortages and stuff, they're not worried about food shortages. They're worried about something else. The world is increasingly dependent on mineral supplies for developing countries. And if rapid population frustrates their prospects for economic development and social progress, the resulting instability may undermine the conditions for expanded output and sustained flows of such resources. All right. So again, like, they're not looking at population control as like, we need to make sure people are healthy and are okay and this and that. They're like, no, I'm worried about my supply chain. And if they become too unstable or whatever else, then we have a hard time working within those countries to get the resources that we need. So I thought that was interesting. The World Population Plan of Action is not self-enforcing and will require vigorous efforts by interested countries, UN agencies, and other international bodies to make it effective. U.S. leadership is essential. The strategy must include the following elements and actions: concentration on key countries, assistance for population moderation should give primary emphasis on the largest and fastest growing developing countries where there is special U.S. political and strategic interest. Again, not about fucking people at all. Those countries are India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Nigeria, Mexico, Indonesia, Brazil, Philippines, Thailand, Egypt, Turkey, Ethiopia, Colombia. I don't know why China's not on there, because they go to town on fucking China. So essentially they're talking like they already have projects in 80 countries. And they talk about like, okay, if the country likes us, how do we do it? If the country doesn't like us, how do we do it? Right? We can't go in as Americans, so we need to go in with corporations. Planned Parenthood is one of those corporations. The way they talk about disseminating in the Americas and stuff, like you'll see that Planned Parenthood fits that fucking hole for them in so many great ways. And so you can understand why it's exploded the way it has globally. So where should I say? Reducing infant mortality, including, see, this is interesting. So providing minimal levels of education, especially for women, reducing infant mortality, including through simple low-cost health care networks, expanding wage employment, especially for women, developing alternatives to children as a source of old age security, right? That's a big problem in like developing countries. Like they need their kids because they can't, that's the only way they're going to be taken care of once their body breaks down. You know, so you need a large family. So like, how do we get rid of this fucking family? We need to get better reasons not to have kids, so they're not depending on those kids. So we need to get them a little bit more money. So all these ideas about empowering women and doing all these things, although they are important and need doing, that is not the reason why they're doing it. And so I think that's why you can see why there's so many problems in it, because it was never meant to actually free women or do any of these things. It was meant to make them not have kids. You know, like if we get them in just enough healthcare, we get them just enough money and keep them busy working and shit, they're not having kids anymore. And this is going to help us curb the problem. Development of a worldwide political and popular commitment to population stabilization is fundamental to any effective strategy. Dude, like I was just listening to an interview the other day where the guy that invented Captain Planet, a show I used to watch when I was a kid, has like 5 episodes about population problems, saying there's too many fucking people on the planet.
Yeah, I saw somebody post about that not too long ago. Or maybe it was somebody. I saw something about that. I was like,
yeah, and that, I mean, that's just a one-off. But like, this is a I can just see it through my schooling, through everything. Like, this is exactly what I was brought up to believe, and I believed this for most of my life. You know, so it's interesting. Like, this thing that they were planning on doing seemed to have really worked out quite well and followed through. Development of worldwide political. Oh yeah, I just said that. The U.S. should encourage LDC leaders to take the lead in advancing family. See, this word family planning. That's what we use now. That's the word we use to avoid, you know, getting weird feelings about what you're hearing. It's not it has nothing, it doesn't imply the negative sides. It's just this nice thing where you're planning your family and population stabilization, both within multilateral organizations and through bilateral contracts with other LDCs. This will require that the President and the Secretary of State treat the subject of population growth control as a matter of paramount importance and address specifically in their regular contacts with leaders of other governments, particularly LDCs. Yeah, I had something, but I forgot.
It's really interesting that stuff you said about the women, because I really do think you might have really hit a point on that. I mean, I really hate to even say that, but I mean,
it sucks.
I mean, I even
it bummed me out.
And the thing is that I see that done now in different ways. Even, I mean, I always say I think QAnon was great at getting women involved into the conspiracy community and to start, following QAnon, or started having a voice and getting into this shit. Now, if you think about that, if you are getting more women into conspiracies and stuff, especially QAnon, if you're a male and you're a lib, you are worth nothing. So now you have just cut down half their options of the race to choose from. And then probably because of COVID, if you got the vaccination, I ain't giving you no ass either. So now you're cutting more people out of the choice of reproducing with. And you've made them extremists in certain areas. So I really hate to say it. I really think from the beginning of time, there's been a psyop on the female race in its own.
Yeah. And then they do it on the left with just, different strategies. Like you always hear now, especially within like the last decade, all we hear is all the single ladies, right? You see all of this "I don't need a man" mentality and independent woman. I mean, that's all part of the agenda to, keep the population from producing more babies, or at least discourages it heavily.
So then we'll get into the Rosicrucian portion of her life. So up to this point, she's chipping away, but it's very difficult, and she's not getting very far because, like we were saying before, the political environment and population beliefs on abortion are very negative, and so no one wants to touch it. But this starts changing for her. One of the big things that changes everything, and this is where you'll read a lot about people saying, like, she was kind of, I think she's a lifelong actor, is what's happened, and this is what really solidifies it coming up here. But so in 1914, she takes a trip to England, and where she's profoundly influenced by the liberation theories of Havelock Ellis. I think you guys talk about him somewhere in one of your shows just recently. And he's a Fabian from Fabian Society. But the thing that's incredible about this is it's not just her that ends up meeting with Ellis and learning about how to implement this kind of idea in terms of abortion. Every woman around the world ends up there to do that. The one in the Australian version of Sanger meets up with him. European ones, like, they all go through him to learn about this shit in this women's movement. So he was also the president of the Malthusiast League, famous sexologist. He had some really odd sexual behaviors himself. I don't remember them by heart, but I was quite surprised. Like, he doesn't orgasm. I think he was a virgin until he was like in his 30s or some shit like that. But yeah, he had a lot of sexual problems. But he definitely liked Sanger a lot. And Sanger became close friends with him and his crew. And his crew were very, again, like, this is where it's interesting the way you guys see the sexual behaviors. But in terms of like historical, like they were very sexualized. Like, I would say, like, they make hippies look look like Christians.
Conservatives.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they were all about it. Like his wife was a lesbian openly at that time, which is insane. Right, so they had an odd relationship even within his own marriage, and it was very open between each other and all this stuff. But he's known to be the head of the Rosicrucian order at the time, and this is more or less like I found this out through a book that was written by a lady that's advocating for her. And this is the book that everyone says, like, this is the definitive book about her life. So I didn't think I was going to find shit in that book. But I think because she's such a big fan and a Rosicrucian and shit, she doesn't draw the line well. And so she lets us in on some of this stuff. And one of those things is that Ellis was this Rosicrucian, the head of the Rosicrucian movement. And so he sends her all over Europe, learning from different European countries on what they're doing for abortion stuff. She smuggles abortion, different kind of tools or contraception things from Europe because it's illegal in the United States. So she's doing a lot of things through them. And something happens, like, so the thing with her is she was an awful person. So she was awful to her family and she was awful to her kids. And like her husband's, like, one thing I will say about her, I mean, if you see her when she's young, like she does have kind eyes and stuff. So I can kind of see like where but she was very sexualized and she was very open about being good that way. And how women are actually, like, for her, women are number one. They're the superior of all superiors, and men should be subservient.
She's the maiden.
And
That's
so
what she's
whenever,
and manipulate men. She knows what she's doing.
she does, because her husband, she marries a few times, which again is crazy for back in the day. She had to really work at her first husband to allow it to happen. And it's not because he had power over her. That's all he had. He was desperate to hold on to her. He would treat her like she was out in Europe fucking other dudes, lying to him and saying like, oh yeah, I'll see you when I see you. And he's at home like desperate, and he's spending all their fortune on her and her movement. So she milks them dry. She has no time or respect for them, and they love her for it. They cannot get over her. And this seems to be every man that comes in contact with her, regardless if they're married or not, but they seem very, like, she has a way of manipulating men. She's very good at it. And people think that she was very sexy and stuff. And so where was I? Okay. So yeah, so Ellis is taking her on, and she's constantly back and forth between Europe and the US throughout these years, working on politicians, working with the eugenicists and stuff like that, trying to get this thing going. And Ellis is helping a lot out with that stuff. And him being involved really opened the door to a lot of players that she wouldn't have had access to before, that allowed that to happen at all. Without Ellis and his contacts, this doesn't, like, we don't have Planned Parenthood, I don't think. And a thing that really binds her to him, and that she states as this being as such, because you're such a bad mother, she neglected her kids. Like, her kids lived in filth and squalor a lot of times. And there was no reason for it. She had money at those times to take care of her kids. Probably they just hated doing it. So they were ignored and very much neglected. And one of them actually fucking dies because of this stuff. And that kid was begging her in letters to come home from Europe, but she didn't want to. So she would just say, "Oh, I'll come, I'll see you then." But she didn't. She would never do it. And so the kid dies, her daughter, and she feels responsible. And Ellis says, "I can bring her back for you." And so he does, apparently. And so she's internally grateful that she gets to see her daughter. And the story that she says, this is from her herself, says that she was with her the rest of her life by her side. And so she was internally grateful to the Rosicrucian. She became openly Rosicrucian, or as open as that is in those days, and devoted herself fully to the cause after that, which I think she was already doing because she was not doing anything else well.
This is probably where we got Ellis Island from.
Ellis Island, what is that again?
The Statue of Liberty.
Oh shit.
Or Hakate, or whoever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then she's now devout and she's all about it, and you can see that the way she spends the rest of her life, there is nothing else in her life. It's just progressing the movement, and she's working with the Rockefellers and different presidents and stuff like that to get to that place. One thing that Ellis does that I thought was interesting is he's one of the early pioneers in psychedelic drug use. Because we see a lot of psychedelic drugs linked to secret societies through the hippie movement and stuff and government.
Sure.
Yeah, so he starts fucking around with mescaline. He does these self kind of things on his own, and does also with peyote. He decides to do it on Good Friday. I don't know if that's important or not.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah, and he says he's experienced, so this is where you guys will like it. So noted extremely vivid, complex colors, pleasant smelling, hallucinations. I never heard of the smell. That's an interesting one. Consisting both of abstract geometrical patterns and definite objects such as butterflies and other insects. Ellis was so impressed by the aesthetic quality of the experience that he gave some specimens of peyote to the Irish poet W.B. Yeats, a member of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, an organization of which other mescaline researchers, Aleister Crowley, was a member of.
Now, you mentioned before on Friday, that even goes back to the whole, like Friday would be a Netzach on the Tree of Life, and that would be, in my opinion, the maiden aspect of the Scarlet Whore, and would have a lot to do with kind of.
What would that be?
That's kind of who you're fucking to go back through the abyss in a sense.
Okay.
When the beast,
so that would make sense.
Kind of the one that you're banging when you're going back in time. But even though like you go back in time, but then like now you go, yeah, it's hard to explain. But I don't want to make this even longer.
Sorry, I know we're running long.
No, it's not your fault. No, I'm just saying like I could run with this for a while. I'm not trying to do that.
Right.
But I do think like even like I think Good Friday is associated with Venus, Hathor, Netzach, all stuff to, parts on the tree that does represent part of this Scarlet Whore and, part of crossing over.
Yeah.
I think.
And it also, from like a spiritual standpoint, why it's so important to do it on those days, at least if he's doing like meditation and stuff, taking all these drugs, getting all of these visions, that's also the death day of Christ. So, Jesus dies, goes 3 days down to the abyss, comes back, and that'd be Easter. So it's like 3 days of this sort of rebirth experience. The dying of the old man and the birth, the resurrection or regeneration of the new man after crossing the abyss and coming back.
Yeah. I would even say, like, if you look at the what is it? I think that's the Elohim. That's the gods that are associated with that sphere, and that actually is a multi-sexual god. But it's because of it. This actually is where you will hear the swarm being mentioned, as in the swarm of like colors, or the swarm of the matrix being projected from that sphere as well. So like you can see it as neither going back and leaving the matrix, or you can see it as when you're coming back and entering the matrix as well. The colors, shapes, and all that stuff starts to take form in front of our eyes. From the smallest thing of grass to this fucking computer I'm using. So. Okay. So like even mentioning the shapes and stuff like that, I think all has something to do with that, because that's the stuff that you'll see shapes and colors as you're getting ready to leave.
Is it? I actually have questions about that for you guys after, but that's crazy. So yeah, so he's doing that. Fuck, dude, you're blowing my mind. But so Ellis at that point, I just want to mention what he thinks of birth control, right? Because if he's the main guy that she's learning from, then his views on birth control would follow hers, you know. So he notes that birth control can't be used randomly. It could have a detrimental impact if it's done that way, but rather needs to be used in a targeted manner to improve the qualities of certain stocks. He observes that unfortunately superior stocks, kind of like what I had mentioned before, actually, I'm not going to... Ellis argued that birth control was the only available way of making eugenic selection practicable, as the only other option was wide-scale abstention from intercourse and those who were unfit, from those who were unfit, right? So he's just he's aligned himself with the eugenics, you know, like it's a branch of eugenics, essentially, is what this is. It's not about rights for abortions or anything like that. It's a eugenics branch, and they think that this is the branch that will actually get the job done. And so that's why they're pushing it so hard. When I didn't mention this, but that report states like, hey, if we do nothing, White House report that got declassified, if we do nothing, this is what the population rate will be in year 2020. And it's fucking high. And then they're like, if we do something, this is where it should be, and this will be good. So right now, because this happened, they did this so long ago, we can actually look at those numbers and see how close their estimations were. And we're very close to the number they were hoping for, which to me indicates that the plan fucking worked. And there are now about 5 or 6 billion people that are not here that should have been here if there would have been no interference. And that to me is insane, to think of that kind of scale of humanity that's been fucked with. Yeah. So that's our boy Ellis. We have come upon a new slogan in working men's meeting and in the labor press, the birth strike. The use of the word implies that the lower classes of the population are now familiar with means of preventing contraception. When preventing becomes an effective weapon in the fight between labor and capital, it will annihilate the working class. Furthermore, while the higher classes can find in the lower ones the recruits they need to replenish their ranks, Freemasonry to Rosicrucianism, or, you know, those inner orders to the outer orders is what I'm hearing there. The lower classes can not fall back upon any other classes, and by letting their numbers diminish, they will lose their political powers. I think that's how Ellis viewed birth control as merely a continuation of an evolutionary progression. Right, so they're falling back into that shit. Between her time in England and Europe and the work on the road. So this is where I mentioned the murder stuff. Okay. Or sorry, her kid dying and him taking over. So just mention a few of the Nazi movement and where it falls in. Like I mentioned before, without getting too deep into it, a lot of the Nazi officials did come here or worked and communicated with our eugenics departments to learn about camps and stuff like that. And they do accredit us for a lot of that stuff. Obviously, they expanded upon it, but they were a big part of it. Blavatsky is an interesting character, I think, when it comes to all this stuff. Through the theological societies. Yeah. And she, with the Thule Society, I'm pretty sure she has involvement with the Thule Society, which is kind of that mystical
Isn't that what Hitler
order
was into?
Sorry?
I think Himmler or Hitler might have actually been interested in the Thule Society. Why some people say that he was influenced by Blavatsky's work. Yes, yeah, they were. They also say that Crowley too, but you don't hear much about that.
Yeah, and so I found this little thing about her. It's hard to fully back this because I didn't see it from its original source, but it apparently is from an original source. Anyways, and it's just a blurb about her in a Masonic paper or something, and so it's have declared talking about Blavatsky, have declared and proclaimed, and by these presents do a companion, perfect mistress, sublime elect Scotch lady, grand elect, chevalier de Rosecroix. And that's the one I'm interested in. That's the Rosie Cross, right? Saying that she's a Rosie Cross member. And it links her to the Nazi movement. And if you look at the eugenics movement, they're very much linked with the abortion people. And the abortion people are full of Rosicrucians, and so are the eugenics, and or some sort of secret society. It's hard not to pick one and find some sort of background in that stuff. And this is the thing I did. This is from 1877 on the 24th day of November, year of true light. Like I don't even know why there's that many. There's fucking 9 zeros, whatever that is.
9.
Yeah. And I did look up John Yonkers, and that actually he was the grandmaster globally at that time. So that it does seem to check out, but I did find it interesting. This is the only time I've seen her linked to the Rosicrucians.
You said there was 9 zeros, right?
Yeah.
Well, if you don't count Doth, there'd be 9 spheres before you get birthed into this world, too.
So that's probably what they're indicating there, eh?
Dude. Dude, look at this. Oh my God. New York Patriot. Look at a few lines up. We, the thrice illustrious Sovereign Grand Master General, and we, the Sovereign Grand Conservators, 33rd and last degree of the Sovereign Sanctuary of England and Wales, decorated the Grand Star of Sirius.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, we were talking about.
Bro, it's the same shit I was talking about yesterday.
Yesterday and before, yeah.
About how to exit the Matrix using the light from Sirius. And remember in the Scarlet Whore, I was like, I mean, at least that's what I think they're doing. And then you see this shit.
Yeah,
That's crazy.
yeah. You don't have Twitter. Lux was posting on stuff about this yesterday, actually.
Crazy.
So, yeah.
There's something up with that star, and that's why you see the star.
Even with the Egyptians, they're big with that shit.
Yeah, and it's why you saw it on the thing earlier, right? The tarot card we were looking at, the star. You know, so much of it revolves around that, and that star is red, and the light from that star affects us. They were talking about it in this scientific article I was reading, and recently, I think it was like 50, 60 years ago or something, this star wasn't red. And then out of nowhere, they don't know why, that it just started to turn red. And we were talking about all that with like the Scarlet Whore and that representation, so that's crazy.
You know what I think too? This is going to sound wild, but whatever. It's just going to sound crazy. But this is really just things that I think about. And I'm like, this could be possible. I think me and Lux have talked about this. You know, what if that, these pyramids, they always have like these tombs in them. I mean, how do you not, and the tops have also had shit removed. In my opinion, I do think at some point they knew and understood the Matrix, and they knew that was just the way out of there. And that shit was built for a way to just shoot yourself out of the fucking system.
Yep.
And then if you want to start taking this whole exodus out of Egypt, what is that maybe really telling you? Because there's no way that you had 13 million motherfuckers on the fucking street. I mean, the amount of 5, whatever number you want to pick, walking down the street at the same fucking time, heading somewhere.
Right.
I have an interesting, maybe for another time or off air or something, but I have an interesting story for that.
Okay.
Yeah. Like some historical evidence of that stuff. That's pretty fucking interesting. Involves Moses and shit, and secret societies within Egypt that Moses was a part of.
Yeah. There's a lot of that stuff. I think that if you look at it at face value and then try to be like, wait, does that make sense? You realize it doesn't, and then you're gonna have to realize this is just it's telling you something, but it's in a parable.
Right.
Right.
Very occulted, very occulted. Like symbols and certain things are being told that mean other shit.
Yeah.
And so Blavatsky, her big thing, instrumental in the Nazi Party and its Darwinian drive. And just so people Darwin's, we brushed by it, but it's important to remember Darwin's cousin is a major part of eugenics. In the creation of eugenics, eugenics does not exist without Darwin. So this idea that Darwin is enlightening us and all of this stuff, Darwinism did a lot of harm for us. and you can say that it's because of our mentality that or whatever. But I think there's more to it than that, and especially when you start looking at fossil records and how it does not fit the Darwin system. But so yeah, so anyway, so this is why, like, and you can expand for days and days about the Nazi movement and linking it back to either Rosicrucians and these other movements as well. But this is some of the stuff that just to touch on it a little bit. This is where I was hoping you could play a video real quick. We'll skip some of this shit. I mean, just so people know, William Gates, Bill Gates' dad, was part of Planned Parenthood. If you could go to that video and go to minute or hour. Okay, yeah, just go to minute 24.
Okay.
On the dot, and we'll play that till like minute 26 and a half. And that'll just talk a little bit about the Nazi movement.
Serve on committees that planned the sterilization of all blacks in countries that came under German control. He would also be one of the first Nazi scientists to become publicly affiliated with the Carnegie-funded eugenics laboratory in Cold Spring Harbor, New York. Eventually, Fisher would also be put in charge of the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute, which was funded by the Rockefeller Foundation. It was here that many of the Nazi programs for creating racial purity were developed.
Keep
There we
playing.
go. No, that's all right. And just since we're on it, go to hour 1, 23 minutes. And we'll play that till 27:30. So hour 1, minute 23. And so this conversation, this is a White House recorded conversation by Nixon because he was a paranoid guy and he fucked himself over by recording all his shit.
Yep.
Then an almost identical strategy would be adopted by the American abortion lobby.
In January of 1973, the Supreme Court legalized abortion on demand throughout the United States, and almost immediately, the Religious Coalition for Abortion Rights was formed.
Less than a year earlier, the following conversation had taken place in the Oval Office of the White House. It began on the 30th of March, 1972, and continued 4 days later on the 3rd of April. This is an actual recording of that conversation. The speakers are the President of the United States, Republican Richard Nixon, and members of his senior staff.
A majority of people in Colorado voted for abortion. I think a majority of people in Michigan voted for abortion. I think in both cases, well, certainly in Michigan, they will vote for it because they think that what's going to be aborted generally are the little black bastards. As I told you, we talked about it earlier, that a hell of a lot of people want to control the Negro bastard. Yeah. Isn't that really true? So we know what we're talking about. Sure. We're talking really in what John Rockefeller can deal with. But the people in what we call our class control their population. Sometimes they'll have a man in 6 or 7 or 8 or 9. But it's exceptional. The people who don't control their families are people in the people that shouldn't have kids. Now that's the white population. Black in the city of San Francisco has gone 3 times right after World War II, to where they represent 30% of the population of San Francisco. That's it.
The religion.
Can we keep
All
playing
right.
or no?
No, that's good.
Okay.
Um,
That's wild.
it is. And just the way he talks about it is like a child to me.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking to Rockefeller and he was explaining to me how they're having 8 kids and, you know, there's too many and, you know, what he calls them.
Yeah.
I don't know if people can
Well,
hear that
so,
properly,
like,
but he calls them like
associated. He doesn't. There's no empathy, sympathy, nothing. No feeling.
there's nothing. And
Right.
it's
No,
it's
it's
very,
Roll in a number that he's looking for.
yeah. And it's very base. It's basic and superficial. His
yeah.
understanding of it, like a child's version of it, you know, like I wouldn't expect a conversation like that to come out of the White House.
Right. And that's real.
Well, nowadays you could.
That's real racism too, in the sense that, you know, he's talking about this whole group of people And he doesn't explain. He just like says it so matter of fact that there can't believe that there is a rising African American population. Uh, it's just so matter of fact. It's just disgusting, as if this is a generally understood thing. Like, can you believe it? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
as if it's comparing them to like animals or something. It's terrible.
Yeah, like they're being invaded.
Mm-hmm.
You know, yeah, it's crazy. So, just to give you guys an idea about the eugenics laws in the United States and how they were going around, like they were really intense laws. And if you watch that Moffat 21, I do recommend the music and stuff. They really do try to play on your emotions and shit. And so it's a bit of a turnoff that way. But I vetted it and I can't find anything wrong. So everything that's in there is legitimate information, and if you really want to like look into it, it's eye-opening documentary. It's worth the watch. So I would recommend that to anyone. Moffat 21. You can find that on YouTube. So by 1979, an estimated 65,000 Americans experienced forced sterilization. In the 20s, it was around 3,000. In 82. 1,700 aborted babies were found in a container. 12 to 1,500 of those were black. This is in the 80s, right? So like this idea that started in early 1900s with abortion and all that racist shit, like we see it all the way up until the 70s with Nixon, and now we're seeing it in the 80s with this aborted container is not the only one. This is something that's happened many times, and if it's happened many times, there's many more that we don't know about. So you know, so this is I forgot. I copy pasted. I didn't get the guy's fucking name, but one of these main guys on the Planned Parenthood. That was involved with Planned Parenthood and received their highest national award. He says he called it was insane not to have government mandate birth control for better society. He ended up killing himself in a suicide pact with his wife over, I think, funds, fucking around with money. So in 98, pro-lifer uncovers a container which housed thousands of aborted children. Operation Rescue preserved the images of the contents. According to OR, this lab is a depot for Family Planning Associates, California's largest abortion chain. There are other containers anyways like this, right? And so like you can't even find the pictures. It needed this group. Thank God they're the ones that found it, or else we probably wouldn't know about it. Neo-Malthusianism, right? Ellis was a Malthusian. It was a Neo-Malthusianism. I didn't touch on that maybe enough, but essentially, like, you know, when you looked at that report that we were looking at from the White House saying how, like, hey, for countries, like, these are the things that we need to do. One of the things in the report is limiting children size, family sizes. The exact fucking thing they did to China, right? The UN convinced China and India to do this, and it was devastating to them, but they took the payoff. There was money involved, and they were trying to quell. You know, India was on that list of countries that we're trying to fucking deal with, and the Gates are still in there, trying to fuck with the farming and shit. And if you look at what Bill Gates did to farming over there, like, underreported, but thousands of farmers were killing themselves because of the GMOs and shit that he was bringing in. Anyways, so okay, so in 91. The board of directors decide to reject federal funding because of this gag rule, where it's prohibited to mention abortion when counseling patients. Planned Parenthood gets funding from the government like a motherfucker. And so they're very much intertwined, and they have a lot of powers, right? They say no to this. Next thing you know, someone comes in 2 years later, is invited to the White House, and witnesses President Clinton ceremoniously end the gag rule in his first week of office. So now all of a sudden, as of 1991, now they're openly allowed to try to convince you to get an abortion when you walk into that clinic. There are over 600 clinics, 58 medical or related affiliates, 101 non-medical affiliates. Since 73, abortion has killed more African Americans than AIDS, cancers, heart disease, crime combined. Every week, more black babies are aborted in America than the entire Vietnam War. Planned Parenthood clinic's #1 chain in the U.S. Wow. So now, and this is an ongoing battle. Another thing, I don't know if I put it, I think it's coming up. I'll wait, just make sure. I'll try not to. Okay, so Alex Sanger, he is the great grandson of Sanger, I believe. He is also in Planned Parenthood. He very much leads the international portion of it. Now, in Mexico, a while back, there was an agreement that was made for exactly to quell or this kind of behavior where other countries would go places around the world and interfere with their population through these abortions and things like that. And so there was laws put in place against doing that. He worked on getting rid of that shit. And now he is the leading head for the international version of this, working in all these countries to do these same fucking things that they're doing here so well. Right? Because for it to really work, you need those 600 clinics. They need to be where those people are that you don't want. So it's a lot of infrastructure. And that law really kept them out of doing too much harm. But that's gone now. And I forget who did that one. It might have been Obama, but I'm not sure. So he committed to raising awareness in America and throughout the world. This is from his website. About the need and demand of developing countries for quality reproductive health care, education, and facilities. During the 90s, he was the only male member of New York City Commissions on the Statute of Women and was a member of the Advisory Council of the Princeton University Program in the Study of Women and Gender and Council of Advisors for the Wellesley Centers for Women. So here's a little quote from Nancy Pelosi. Well, the Family Planning Service reduced costs. They reduced costs. The states are in terrible fiscal budget crisis now, and part of what we do for children's health education and some of those elements are to help the states meet their financial needs. One of the initiatives you mentioned, the contraception, will reduce costs to the states and to the federal government. This is 2009, right? Like, she's thinking about killing off babies so they can save money.
I know it's terrible, but I'm honestly not surprised at all.
No, yeah, it's not shocking, but it's just really fucked up.
Right.
So the artwork that you see on the right, that is Alex Sanger's artwork. I don't know what to make much of it. Like, one of them, the icon is hiding it, but there's a lot of topless people and there's a kid being held in the background. It shows the city. Whenever he draws cityscapes, they're always like this, all jumbled up and in disarray and a bit of chaos. And I think that's displaying, like, that's something that Sanger, in his family, that Margaret Sanger would say a lot. Like, she grew up in New York City when, like, piss and shit was so thick on the roads, like, you needed a fucking plow. Like, things were so fucking gross and disgusting and bad and chaotic. And I think, like, his art of cities depicts a lot of that constantly. And I don't know, the American flag one's interesting. Again, like, just a lot of kids in it. And then there's these, like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 shadow figures that are kind of in it. Just fucking weird North Haven flag painting. I don't fully get it. But in 2021, President Biden issued a it was Biden that did it just recently, memorandum on protecting women's health at home and abroad. The order overturns the Mexico City policy and allows federal funds to be used to pay for abortions.
Wow.
And and so that's
honestly, when it comes down to it, it gets so dark and twisted. But not only is it about the depopulation, but it's also what they're doing with these aborted fetuses. I mean, the amount of research that they use these fetuses is disgusting. I mean,
And who knows what they're extracting? Like, I don't know. This is also like I've never found anything to show this. But I
stem cells.
Yeah, the stem cell shit, adrenochrome, or any kind of organs, right?
Yeah.
Because
And like you really don't know. I guess you're right. I mean, I'd have no idea. Right?
no idea, dude. And they are like, these are the same people that are trying to push for live abortion. Like they're constantly trying to push the bar back, right? Like 100 years ago, abortion was an insane thought by everyone. Even the craziest of the crazies were like, I ain't touching that shit. And now we're at the point where we've gone to a place where it's like, I don't know, is it okay if they're alive and we kill them?
Right.
You know, like, so just to show you that
And then
propaganda
how short
that they
of
talk
time,
about.
really? How short of
Not
a
a long
time did that
time.
happen?
No, a couple generations.
That's
like they
fucking
keep
scary
talking
if you
about.
think about it.
Yeah, man.
Where
we
will
gonna
we be in another few generations from now? We keep going in that direction.
Yeah.
We will annihilate our own self.
Yeah, it's like, you know what? My 7-year-old's really fucking pissing me off right now. I'm going to abort.
Well, it's like Kronos. It's the same energy that's being replicated. You know, eating his children. But what I was going to say is fuck. Never mind. I forgot what it was.
You did it.
Yeah.
I'm the one who smokes on the show. Not him.
Yeah, we were just talking about that. I'm glad Lux did one.
Yeah, man.
At least that was
But yeah, that's about it, guys. For only 2 hours and 40 minutes later.
Real quick. I did want to mention, and I'm doing this now because I don't want to forget at the end. This doesn't mean I'm ending the show. For one, I wanted to give people shout outs, and I'm not doing it at the beginning. So if you want to hear your name, you're actually going to have to listen to the whole show.
That's right.
Ray, Marianne, XCX, Nicole, Steve Evil, and Maywood. Big shout out to Maywood, somebody hooking me up with guests already for my own show. That's what's up. You know, people, this person listens to 2 shows, thought they should do something together, and they're trying to reach out and told one.
Mm-hmm.
So I appreciate shit like that. And I really want to stress people why we were doing this show. I even had a fan hit me up on Instagram and say, what happened? Spotify took you down. We're actually still, our episode dropped, but he can't find it. But I see it on my end. And then I sent him a link and he says, that's weird. When he was looking, that one wasn't showing up. So we really want to stress, there's 2 things I want to stress. One, Apple, as much, or anywhere else, really. It's not Spotify. And 2, I do want to mention at some point, at least if not me and Lux and other people, but I'm sure me and Lux and ourselves, if you have the Spreaker app, if you download that, we eventually, I know I am, and I'm sure Lux is going to, eventually we'll be going live. And you will have a chat if you have the Spreaker app, and you can actually talk to us. You know, so I suggest to maybe get that if you're interested in, being that, close to us, whatever, bullshit with us. Why if we go live, download that, and because I do plan on doing that in the future. We'll be able to chat with people, or besides lives going on YouTube. I could probably do the both. Actually, I think if I do it right, I could go live to YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, and then even to Spreaker at the same time. So we can really reach out to a lot of people and bullshit with you too. So. I just wanted to say, fuck Spotify and get the Spreaker app for our lives.
Yeah. Also, and just bringing that up because we noticed if you look at our demographics, nearly half of all of you listen to the podcast on Spotify, and the other half of you listen to it on Apple. So we knew that there would be a huge amount of the people who listen to the show who would kind of get confused, wonder where they can find us. So Spotify guys, sorry about that, but definitely come and try and find us anywhere else. Find platforms that aren't censoring free speech. Also, I got 2 shout outs myself.
Nice.
Got a shout out to Australia. That's right.
Oh,
The whole fucking country. You bastards. I swear, when we first started this thing, you were at 0.0 0.02% of the population that listen to us, you crazy bastards are third place. You've
Wow,
got all
get
the
the
way,
fuck out of here.
you've got all the way up to
that
like
is
third place.
wild.
It's crazy, man. And also we have a 0.05% of the people who listen to us are over the age of 55 to 65. So shout out to all you guys, because that's badass. If you're still trying to listen to our show, seek knowledge, and probably age group like that could teach us a thing or two, but appreciate the listen. So thank you very
wild,
much.
actually, if you think about it, people even because normally at that age you're kind of stuck in your own mindset. You're kind of, for a lot of people, you can really be stuck in your own. And I think that's amazing, showing that there's still people that age that are listening to shows like this.
Right.
It's nice to see. At least something.
Right. And then my ass is that old. I don't know if I'd be able to figure out how to, look at podcasts and shit.
Yeah, right. I have enough problems with StreamYard.
Right. I have tough man.
Before, no lie, this is how, I have no problem telling them myself. Before, when Marqui was showing the shit, and he was like, I'm like looking at the screen, and like I'm bringing my fucking face like close to the fucking screen, because like I'm totally forgetting I can actually choose full screen. I'm literally looking at like this fucking small ass screen. And I'm like, yo, is that like an Archer? And then I'm like, yo, dumbass, just hit the fucking full screen button.
Right.
I'm standing like squinting my eyes. I'm like, yo, I'm getting fucking old. I can't see this shit.
Right.
It was just me being stupid with technology.
You get your magnifying glass out. You're like putting it up to the computer.
Yeah, see my monocle. Yo, Marqui, that was a banger. I don't know. I don't know if I might break this up into two or leave it as one. I have no idea.
Yeah, it's pretty big.
But I'll probably still release it like two within 1 week, and then the other one the next week. But it'll probably be like on a Saturday if I break it up into three. I think that was amazing work, though.
Yeah,
and
you killed it.
I think you presented a good case for the question, the things you thought of possibly with, I guess, the Nazis and Planned Parenthood. I really do think you brought some stuff that should. It makes me wonder, and it makes me think that maybe you're onto something there.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, no. I think that was some great work. I really appreciate you bringing this stuff on, because when you had even mentioned Planned Parenthood prior, I was very interested, and I think you presented a very good case.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. That's impressive stuff to see. What somebody who doesn't have a show do.
Yeah. And it helps to paint a big picture of everything, because like people always will ask us, well, who's at the very top? And this is what we're more or less kind of coming to the conclusion, is that it's all of these different families that are spread out all over the globe, and they have different secret societies that all feed up into one. And, you hear there's a lot of misconceptions about the Rosicrucians, and you did a really great job of outlining facts instead of conjecture. And I think that you put one more piece of the chessboard together to help us figure this whole thing out, because that was huge.
Yeah, fuck yeah. This was like some serious shit, dude. I was impressed.
Yeah,
sweet.
Yeah.
I'm glad you guys enjoyed it.
No. I mean, this was, honestly, if we were to cover something, I think you pretty much did it the same way we tried it. That was fucking impressive, man. You did that on yourself, and you had the courage to come on the show.
Yeah, it helps when you don't have kids.
You're following their agenda, man.
I know, dude. I know. I because I like the Planned Parenthood shit. Like, I have about, honestly, like when I do decide to release a project, I probably have around like 50-60 hours worth of stuff to talk about, and that happened to me a lot. I saw myself. I'm like, fuck. Like, I believe this. Like, these fucking ideas are why I don't have fucking kids. And then I saw my family, because we're French Canadians. I'm like, fuck, they did this to us. Like, this happened to my fucking family. And, being white and stuff, you don't think of that shit. I mean, French Canadians, like, yeah, we're marginalized and shit, and people don't like us, but it's nothing. Like, it's really nothing, especially me. Like, I have zero accent. I can blend in as perfectly as I fucking want to. So I have zero problems being French person. Like, I don't have a real plight like other groups have. I have advantages really because I have that second language, you know, in business terms, but like personal terms, that's different. People do have prejudice. That's where you see the prejudice. But like, anyways, when I look back at this, what was happening, like that shit happened to my community. And that's where I want to leave people with is like, just like, don't think this didn't fucking happen to you, or you don't have backgrounds that this happened to your family. And if you start understanding how trauma works and the effects that it has long term, past generation, even though this might have happened to someone in your family 7 generations ago, like you're still feeling that shit. Yeah. And so it's just hopefully empowers them, like, because it felt like for me, like an empowering a bit to find that shit out and how wrong I was in my thought process. Because now I can work around like breaking from that, you know? Yeah.
And the thing that really pisses me off the most about the whole thing in the modern era is that they specifically target the, you know, Black African American group in the country, not only in ours but in other countries, and they depopulated, killed all of these, you know, generations of black babies. And then we know how sinister the plan is because they come out and say it, like you showed, that this is what they were going to do to the black community. And then years later, they have, you know, the government and all of these fucking politician assholes who've planned this all out, then get on TV and then try to beg for, you know, all of this bullshit with, you know, there's white supremacy, black people need to watch out, black people are being oppressed, and the same people that are saying that black people are oppressed are the same fuckers who made them oppressed and killed a generation of black babies, and then they use the black population for votes, manipulation, and to fucking, like, you know, saw all the riots that happened last couple of years. Like, if there's any population of people that should be truly pissed, it should be the black community, and you know, see this whole big picture because it's affecting them hard.
Yeah, but the thing that worries me a little bit about that is like, I never want to, and it's not because I don't believe the plight is it's fucking insane. Like, I honestly don't understand how people aren't like, how like black communities that are aware of this information don't go crazy, you know, because it's so intense. But I worry about just saying like one community, because especially with this kind of stuff, like same thing that Martin Luther King did. Like at the end of his life, he wasn't talking as much about the black plight. He was talking about class plight. And I think that's the bigger thing, because then we're not excluding the Hispanics and the, sorry, I think that's okay. But like you know, Spanish speaking or like whatever, like, all of these communities have gone through fucking hell. The Aboriginal communities, you know, like, and so I feel like they got left out sometimes in these discussions. And that would feel like I just try to put myself in that mind thought. It's like, yeah, we're talking about them, but like, I'm even lower than that. Like, we won't even talk about me, what happened to me. Like, you know, like I can't even get to where, say the black community is at. Right. So I think it classes, again, it separates in a way when we're not trying to, but I feel like it creates it. So like really it needs to be brought back together where it's like me, like, hey, I've been fucking, like, my population has been disseminated on purpose. My Native American friends, same fucking thing happened to them. Black people, same fucking thing happened to them. Like, some are worse than others, 100%. But it's touched us all. Irish people, right? Like the potato famine, like it fucking happened to you. You might not realize, but like you got fucking, that was an extermination project. They say so. They use it as a positive case study. So yeah, anyway, so I just think it's important to make sure, like, always try to bring in as many people as possible, because it really is many people and everyone should feel included in that, I think, in a way. But
Everybody's getting
sorry,
fucked.
I'm ranting, but yeah.
No, you made a good point, though. You made a good point. It is all about finding reasons to separate each other's experiences or some shit, or separating each other from each other. You know, by race or by sexuality.
I get that. I'm just saying that they use these same groups that they oppress the most to then, you know, either have Nancy Pelosi on TV thanking George Floyd for giving his life for, you know, equality. It's like they manipulate just some groups way
Yeah.
in a more sinister way than others, just modern times at least.
Yeah. And I didn't mean to, say that you were doing what I was talking about there. I just think in general, I don't hear enough about.
Oh yeah, we all should be pissed. I'm just saying, I
Yeah,
hope
no,
that they
you're
get
right.
pissed.
Yeah, dude, I don't fucking understand how some communities are doing as well as they're doing. Because I try to put myself in those shoes, man. I don't know how it'd fucking be, you know. So
Yeah.
Oh, that is a very good point. That's a very
Yeah.
good point. All right, so yeah, I guess Marquis, thank you so much for
yeah, man.
Yo, that was awesome. Like I said, it was an awesome presentation. I'm sure we could have you on again at some point for something else.
Yeah, hopefully.
especially if you're gonna present it like this. I don't got a problem with it. Yeah. So yeah, all our links for our show will be in the bottom as usual, and the link for Lux Rising. Lux, you want to tell people about it?
Yeah, a new podcast that I just started not long ago. Luck Rising Podcast. We're going to have guests on, talk about a bunch of different interesting subjects, talk a lot about like the paranormal, the occult, you know, pretty much anything that sounds exciting, and also going to make some independent content, just sort of, you know, my own, you know, kind of deciphering or deculting a lot of occult information for people, and probably similar to the way that you just presented yours in sort of like the slide form, you know, where it's really doing a lot of research based stuff to make sure that the points are proven.
Nice.
But-
Yes, and the link for that will be in the bottom.
Yes, sir. So
That's
now we
another-
have the
That's another
your
reason why.
channel.
Yes. Say that again.
I said that's why it's really cool now, because when you go to Spreaker and you want to listen to our stuff, not only can you listen to my podcast, you can also listen to New York Patriots podcast and the Occult Rejects all at the same place, and it's really cool.
Yeah, and if we do go live with one or either or both of those, you'll be able to catch it on there. So that's why I was stressing not so much saying that Spreaker is the best. It's just that if you want to have better options to hear us live and interact with us, just get that app, and we'll let you know when we go live.
Yes, sir.
And yeah, so the notes and so all the links to all our stuff and my own show and our Discord, please check out our Discord. If you have Discord, awesome fucking people in there, awesome fans, just a lot of stuff. People just like Marquis in there, just spreading information. Definitely check it out. And that's it. And until the next one, everybody be well. Later.